Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. So much to get through here. Thank you to Julia. Back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We are, of course, going to be talking about the former Royal Marine barred from working with children after he protested his questions and comments about illegal immigration. This has naturally sparked a free speech row. Is safeguarding now being weaponised, for goodness sake? Meanwhile, dovetailing into this, Joey Barton has received a suspended jail sentence for grossly offensive posts. Is this proof that Britain is essentially criminalising free speech? We'll have more on that in a few moments. Also this afternoon, Nigel Farage has been reported to the police by a former Reform campaigner over alleged misreported election expenses in Clacton. Oh, God. The ex-councillor claims local spending was logged as national spending, breaching electoral law, and has sent documents to the Metropolitan Police. Mr Farage's allies have called it a smear by a disgruntled insider and says it is politically motivated. Details to come. And Labour is under fire for pushing pubs and bars to hire more teenagers to help cut youth unemployment. This comes as the hospitality industry is reeling from tax rises, national insurance, minimum wage, etc., which, of course, in some cases is actually forcing hospitality to lose members of staff. We'll have more on that story as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. The issue of free speech is perpetually fascinating to me. When I consider doing this job for as long as I've done this job and the subjects that came up and still come up time and time again, obviously the NHS, the police, law and order, that kind of stuff for about 5 years, almost every day. Brexit was discussed incessantly. But I think the issue of free speech is really, genuinely an interesting one. It doesn't matter which angle you come at it from, but it's always going to be of interest. And I think that's because it's ultimately within our DNA. So something in us, our little antenna, pings at that moment when we think of free speech. What do we have the right to say? When do we have the right to say it? Does it come with caveats? Are there certain T's and C's, rules and regs that you naturally adhere to? You can't, incite violence. You can't threaten to kill someone. You can't libel someone. So there's three obvious areas where freedom of speech, of course, would be questioned. Now, this story, you may well be familiar with the details. It's the story of Jamie Michaels. He's 47. He's a father of two, a former Iraqi veteran, hard-working dad who also gave back to his community by being a volunteer coach at his daughter's local football club. But it all went horribly wrong and his world came crashing down. Suddenly, life didn't feel quite real to Mr. Michael. And all this happened when he posted something on Facebook which resulted in him being charged with inciting racial hatred after describing some migrants as scumbags and psychopaths. So he put a 12-minute video up onto his Facebook page to let his thoughts be known. Eventually, the police and the courts decided this was going all the way. He had his day in court. Now, this is fundamental to the whole thing. He went to court. They took it all the way to court. And the jury came back after 17 minutes, which is hardly time to put the flipping kettle on in the jury room. 17 minutes and he was cleared. Done and dusted. He was not guilty of inciting racial hatred. A jury of 12 good men and true. However, he might have been cleared, but his local safeguarding board, which is responsible by law for protecting vulnerable children, then ruled that he's not suitable to work with youngsters. He was told less than a fortnight after his acquittal that a child protection concern made against him had been substantiated. They essentially held it up. And in the complaint, the person wrote, this was prior to the acquittal. He's currently out on bail and amazingly back coaching one of the girls' team, which I feel is a disgrace. The letter went on to say he should be nowhere near coaching until his trial outcome. I am worried for my child's safety, as I would be afraid that someone might retaliate physically against his views while he's in the middle of a coaching session. They then said, I trust you can take my concern to the School Football Association, as many other parents are also concerned, and seem to be, the RCT, that's the association, seem to be ignoring the fact that someone with such radical and racial views is coaching kids. Now, I've seen the 12-minute video, and some would say it's contentious, some might say it's up for debate in certain areas. I don't think you could watch the video and come out with the belief that these are radical and racial views. I genuinely believe that. They might not be your cup of tea. There might be things you disagree. There's bits of it that I thought, well, he could have worded that better. We're going to talk to him a little later in the programme, in about 20 minutes. So, there were bits of it I thought, well, he could have said that in a slightly more stylish way, than he might not have been in this situation. But the idea that it was radical and racial is frankly for the birds. But as a result of that letter, the Football Association of Wales, they all got together after the acquittal this was, and decided he will be barred from coaching his daughter's team after a meeting held in private with the local authorities' safeguarding officer and South Wales Police. He is now suing the authorities for 25,000 quid for breaching his human rights. He said, it makes no sense. It just seems to me they want to punish me because of my opinions and because my views don't align with theirs. Did he incite violence or racial hatred? On the Facebook post, he urged, but now this is the really crucial bit, I think, and one would assume, and we'll ask him this later, would have formed a very big part of his defence in court. He urged people to get ready, OK? This is with his exasperation over illegal immigration. He said, that doesn't mean getting bats and knives and stuff. I'm talking about doing things the right way. Getting in big groups, having meetings, going to the council, going to the police, politicians, the councillors. Now that, to me, would override any accusation that this fellow was trying to stir something up in an unsavoury way. That looks like a bloke that has concern with illegal immigration and wanted to find the best way to impart that to all those people that might be able to do something about it. But he was arrested by officers at his workplace. He spent 3 days in the local police station awaiting questioning, and then 17 days on remand. Didn't even get bail on this. This was a jail in Cardiff. He said it was pretty rough. A month later, concerns against Mr. Michael were raised with the Safeguarding Board, and the rest we now know. Is Britain criminalising free speech? He wrote something on Facebook, wasn't to everybody's liking. I don't think anybody could say that was racist. You might say there was a generalisation. You might find there were bits in it that didn't quite tally with your beliefs. But did that in any way, in any shape or form, I don't think anybody could see that post and suggest that this was inciting racial violence and should therefore preclude him from coaching football at his daughter's football team. I mean, to me, that bit is beyond belief. There's a lot of stuff about the Joey Barton stuff that is beyond belief. There's a lot of stuff about the Joey Barton stuff. He's a pretty grim character, let's be honest, that I also don't get at all, and, totally understand how he ended up in front of the beak, or to a degree. Maybe a magistrate who'd have said, mate, you're being a bit of an arse. Perhaps that. 0344 499 1000. Is Britain criminalising free speech? We'll throw that question out there. I want your thoughts on that. Your thoughts on this particular man. Do you think in any shape or form that Jamie Michael should be banned from coaching football because he was found not guilty of the crime that he was arrested for? I mean, it's quite extraordinary stuff, this. Your thoughts on that? You can throw Joey Barton into the mix. The whole free speech issue is up for grabs here. In particular, that question, is Britain criminalising free speech? Lines are open. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Zach Wagman, Conservative councillor for Stanmore, is with us. Afternoon to you, Zach.
Good afternoon, Ian. Good to be with you.
Good to have you with us. So this is the story we start with. The former Royal Marine barred from working with kids after protesting against illegal migrants. This was all down to a post he put on Facebook. Let's have a little listen to a snippet of what he said.
I'm talking about doing things the right way. Getting in big groups, having meetings and going to the council, going to the police and going to the going to the politicians, okay, and making sure these things happen. And if they don't happen, okay, then the council of police and everything are asking for trouble, because they're going to move these people in here, and then we will see trouble. Because these people, I'm telling you now, these people are being told to cause chaos, right? And you can see it happening now all across Britain. We haven't got much time left, guys. We're in another 5 years, I reckon, and this country will be gone. It will be gone then. But the people who are saying it's gone now are the ones who want to sit back, watch Love Island, and start saying, oh my God, look at this, oh my God, look at that, without doing nothing to defend your children and defend your way of life against these scumbags that are coming into our country. Right, our country ain't gone. It's gone if you let it go, but our country ain't gone.
So that seems to be the incriminating bit, Zach, as I can ascertain from that, would be the word scumbag. I think the word psychopath was used in there, and it was arguably that point that saw him standing in front of a courtroom, and I should add, found not guilty. What are your thoughts?
I think this case really sums up a lot of what the problems that we have are across society, not just in relation to free speech, but in prioritisation of how we address the issues facing us. Because as you say, that video there is not really the way I would sum things up or the way I would describe what's going on in this country. But it's certainly not in those three brackets that you mentioned before of exceptions that we have to the rule of free speech. It's not threatening, it's not inciting, and it's not libeling any individual. And I think all the way through there's just a litany of errors, in the sense he's arrested and kept in the cells for 3 days. He's kept on remand, I think you said, for slightly over 2 weeks. And that's ridiculous when you think about the strain on resources that the police, that the jails are having to deal with. And then this guy, as is right and as the government wants to stop happening, is brought before a jury, and they took all of 17 minutes to acquit him. Yeah, all of the jury would not have had time to make a cup of tea by the time they'd made their decision. Which tells you, firstly, that the general public know far better than our experts and our overlords, as it were, what's right and what's wrong. But the fact is, this person has been acquitted and has been cleared of all crimes and has nothing to answer for. And therefore, it's gross overreach by the local council, the local football association, to say he can't coach his daughter's football team.
Yeah, and they see. Originally, the letter that went in of complaint went in while he was awaiting trial. Well, the verdict hadn't come through. Well, the verdict came through in 17 minutes, so it must have been while he was awaiting trial. Now, you could say, OK, maybe while the court case was going on, they could have just said, look, hang in there, and we'll have the court case, and then if you're found not guilty, you're clearly back coaching. I understand that point. But, of course, the letter that went in suggested that, this was somebody who was radical and in fact, their turn of phrase was, it looks like you're ignoring a person with radical and racial views who is coaching our kids. Now, after he was found not guilty, surely the chronology suggests that that's the end of it, right? I mean, you don't then go on to penalise somebody else, and another organisation or another group decides, well, you might have been found not guilty, but we think you are guilty.
You're absolutely right. Who does the local council or the local football association think they are, that they think they're better than a Crown Court or better than whatever the court was to adjudicate on this individual's fate and justice? I think it's entirely wrong. As you say, while he's under investigation or while he's waiting for the case to come, I think there probably is a case to say that you were on the side of caution, particularly where kids are involved, about being careful about who can and can't have access to them. But this man has been acquitted. He, by the way, speaks for a large number of people in how they feel about society and what's going on in our country. And it fundamentally comes back to that. In this country, we believe in equality under the rule of law. You, I, this gentleman, everyone is judged by our peers in a court of law, by a jury and by a judge. He was judged to have done nothing wrong, to have committed no crime, so he should be allowed to carry on his life now as if this never happened. And it's gross overreach from the powers that be that have decided that they know better than the individuals on the jury and said that he can't look after his girls' football team. Yeah,
and of course, if you fast forward maybe a year or so down the line, there wouldn't be a jury hearing this case. There would just be a judge. Now, I know it arguably depends on the flavour of judge you might get. Judges are, of course, meant to be impartial, but they're also human. I mean, that's worth a look at, isn't it? Because it was, a jury where 12 people were able to chew the fat. Only took them 17 minutes, chew the fat, have a quick chat about it and say, well, clearly, you might not have liked what the bloke says, but is he guilty of inciting racial hatred? Clearly not. So a judge might have taken a different view to that.
Absolutely. In this country, we believe that the people are king effectively, whether that's democracy, whether that's in the legal and judicial system. When you go before the jury, these are ordinary people. The chances are there'll be men and women from all walks of life that come together to hear a case and they judge on it. Judges, on the other hand, they've all got legal qualifications and they're vastly experienced, but they will have been to the same handful of universities, mixed with the same sorts of people. They usually tend to be at the same age or roughly sort of same age group. And it means, firstly, you don't have that second or third or fourth voice questioning things that when you have a jury, they'll all have picked up on something different during the evidence and bring a different perspective. But it means that justice will be meted out in this country by a very small, finite group of people that all come from a similar academic background. Of course, there'll be different social backgrounds, there'll be men and women, and they'll come from different classes and different races. But actually, it points to there being something more important than that. They will be mixing with the same people. They will have a lot of the same preconceptions about how the judicial system works. And by the way, what's really important, when you go to a jury trial, most people do it once, if ever, and certainly not more than a couple of times. Judges will have heard cases every day for years and years. And so you can imagine a judge going, I've heard this defence before, and that time it wasn't real, so this time it won't be real.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I would also add as well, often judges are, they're very diligent, and I'm not criticising, we've got great judges in this country. There's obviously some iffy ones, and there's ones where we scratch our head and think, how on earth did somebody not get a custodial sentence for, running over an old lady while drunk or whatever. But generally speaking, the problem I have with them isn't that they're politicised, it's that they're judges, and judges should not be coming to that decision based mostly on the fact that if you went just by the letter of the law, rather than the manifest spirit of what might have happened, then the judge is probably right. You could probably say, did he incite racial hatred? Is it possible he did? And you could say, well, it's possible he did, so the judge will go that way. Whereas a jury will debate it in a group fashion, which allows for the nuance to manifest and allows for common sense to prevail.
Ian, you're absolutely right. And in this instance, you have the jury, all sorts of people who knows who they were, but from different backgrounds. They went away, and in less than half an hour, they debated it. They considered everything that they'd been told and said there was no case to answer. This had gone through, no doubt, plenty of legal officers, lawyers, police officers, sentencing advisors, and so on, who all felt that maybe there was a case, maybe there wasn't the case. But when it came before the ordinary people of the country, wherever this court was sitting, they came to a conclusion within 17 minutes that there was no criminal case here. And that is why our legal system has its faults, and this, as you say, is not to say that the judges are not intelligent people or they're not well versed, but what's so good about our legal system is the fact that me and you and people like us and people not like us get to sit in judgment on our peers, because ultimately the good of the people, the will of the people, is what is supreme in this country.
Yeah. On that point, Zach, stay with us. We'll come back to more stories. We're talking about Nigel Farage getting reported to the police, taxpayers facing staggering amounts of money in terms of the Home Office bill for the most lucrative migrant centre deal ever. And in addition to that, Kemi Badenoch's unveiling an alternative grooming gang inquiry. Details to come. This is Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, Talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. We have Zach Wagman with us, Conservative councillor for Stanmore. Let's move to this story, Zach. I mean, as a Conservative, not sure where you sit on this, but Nigel Farage has been reported to the Met by a former campaign aide over allegedly falsifying election expenses, accused of booking local Clacton costs as national spend, which is a breach of electoral law. It's all divided up, as I'm sure you know. Deputy Leader for Reform Richard Tice spoke to The Breakfast Show this morning. Let's have a listen to what he said.
First of all, this is by a disgruntled former councillor who was expelled from the Reform Party for allegedly inappropriate sexual behaviour back in the summer. And surprise, surprise, he's now making all sorts of allegations. Well, that's a surprise. Secondly, there is what they call a one-year statute of limitations to this particular issue. Well, obviously, we're well past a year, unless it seems that the Crown Prosecution Service could determine that it might be required. Well, that would be quite interesting. This is the same Crown Prosecution Service that determined recently it didn't have enough evidence in the China spy case, despite 18 months previously determining that it did have enough evidence for the China spy case. I would suggest to the Crown Prosecution Service, focus on what really matters, which is those people who are trying to spy and do harm to our country, as opposed to people like Nigel who are frankly trying to save the country.
Well, I mean, you're an opposition party, of course, Zach, but what do you make of this? I mean, the disgruntled member of staff does sound, you know, like a fairly reasonable comment, although I'm sure the man concerned will say, well, you know, what am I meant to do? If I think I've spotted something that's wrong, I'm going to point it out.
I think that final bit is the most important one. This individual, regardless of his background and his motivations, we are led to believe has spotted something within the accounts that he thinks is not right and has reported it. I think the fact that it's come into the press and made its way into the news does suggest there's political motivation behind it, and there's been plenty of briefing and counter briefing as to why this person was kicked out of the party and why he didn't get on with his colleagues and so on. The reality is the police and the Electoral Commission will investigate it. If there's a case for them to answer, that will be put to Nigel Farage and to his agent, and if there's not, then it will be dismissed. And we can't really say too much for certain until we know what comes of it. And it could end up being totally spurious, in which case this individual's wasted everyone's time, or it could be that there's a case for him to answer.
Well, we will wait and see, of course. Only the Electoral Commission will be able to tell us. A couple of stories here. Home Office plans to spend over £1 billion on its busiest migrant centre contract ever. This is a 10-year deal that will run from 2028, covering an expanded Heathrow immigration removal centre. I mean, it shows you how bad things are when this is an announcement to the tune of £1 billion on one migrant centre deal. These are eye-watering numbers, Zach.
£1 billion is a huge amount of money, and if we think how that could be either reimbursed to the taxpayer, so we all didn't have to pay that amount of money, or put to, quite frankly, better use on things like teachers and nurses and prison spaces, I think we'd all rather see that. the reality is we know there's a large backlog and we know there's a lot of people claiming asylum and coming to this country illegally, and that costs money. I think the real questions to be asked are twofold. The first is around the increase. So I understand this is a 42% increase, taking into account inflation, since the last time this centre was commissioned for a similar contract. And I think there really have to be questions asked about why it's costing so much more and whether the government have just rolled over a contract effectively with someone that they know they're working with, or they've gone to look for better value elsewhere. And I think that's one of the significant questions. I think the other question is, what does this contract involve? Because we all recognise that asylum seekers need to have their cases heard as quickly as possible, and judged and adjudicated and so on. But again, from the reporting, it sounds like this is going to include things like tutors and art lessons and NHS services on site. And I think there are real questions there why that's provided to asylum seekers before we've determined whether their claims are valid or not, and why those services are not available to tax-paying members of the public.
I could run this for £500 million. I might try and put a late bid in, see what happens, Zach. And it would be a very swift removal centre, I can tell you that much. Let's move to this one. Your leader, Kemi Badenoch, set to launch an alternative grooming gang inquiry centred on offenders' religion and ethnicity after survivors quit in protest at delays and a watered-down probe that they say dilutes the scandal. Let's have a listen to the Tory leader speaking on this very issue.
To be clear, that a national inquiry must leave no stone unturned. It must investigate councils, the police, and even the government if necessary. It must be time limited, and it must consider the role of ethnicity, religion, and other cultural factors.
I think most people would probably agree with that last point, Zach.
You're absolutely right, Ian. There is nothing controversial in what Kemi said there, and indeed in the wider comments that her and her team have made today. And I think what you see there is opposition at its best. The reality is 6 months ago, the government agreed to an inquiry and they've not been able to publish or work on their terms of reference. So Kemi and her team, who of course have more time than government ministers do at the moment, have written that terms of reference, and they've been very transparent and say, we'll submit this to the government, you can use this because for whatever reason you've not put forward your terms of reference. And this is what opposition should be doing, holding government to account and coming forward with constructive proposals. And everything Kemi said there is absolutely bang on, and if this can get the Home Office to get a move on with things, then it will be extremely welcome.
And on that point, Zach, we hit the clock. Lovely to have you on, by the way, and we will speak again, I'm sure. Zach Wagman, Conservative Councillor for Stanmore. On that last issue, you might want to comment on that, 0344 499 1000. I think if you're looking at a grooming gang scandal of this magnitude, and of course the wider Baroness J report into grooming into child sexual abuse looked at more than just the grooming gangster. It looked at a whole raft of other areas where children were so badly, criminally let down. But on the specifics of the grooming gang, to not bring in the cultural component of the offenders, I mean, it would be a little like turning up at a murder case and not being allowed to mention the weapon, right? I mean, it just seems extraordinary. This is not any other business kind of fact in these cases. This is absolutely pivotal to wondering what the heck has gone on. 0344 499 1000. On that question of free speech, is free speech, or is Britain criminalising free speech? Has Britain certainly got to that stage where we're looking at weaponising issues around safeguarding in order to curtail free speech? We'll take more calls on that, and we are going to speak with Jamie Michaels in a couple of moments. He's the guy right at the centre of this story. He's a former Iraq veteran. He's a dad of two. He's a proud father, a diligent worker, and he's angry. He didn't think his anger would result in an arrest, a protracted time in custody, and then a Crown Court trial, but it did. He was found not guilty. But where does this leave him now? Because this is not over. Details coming next.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Loads to get through here, and the story of the former Royal Marine who's been barred from working with children after he protested against illegal migrants. Free speech groups are warning that safeguarding is being weaponised against patriotic views. Veteran Jamie Michael was even blocked from coaching his daughter's football team. Let's have a listen. This is just a snippet of what he said.
I'm talking about doing things the right way. Getting in big groups, having meetings, and going to the council, going to the police, and going to the politicians, okay? And making sure these things happen. And if they don't happen, okay, then the council, the police, and everything are asking for trouble because they're going to move these people in here, and then we will see trouble. Because these people, I'm telling you now, these people are being told to cause chaos, right? And you can see it happening now all across Britain. We haven't got much time left, guys. We're in another 5 years, I reckon, and this country will be gone. It will be gone then. But the people who are saying it's gone now are the ones who want to sit back, watch Love Island, and start saying, oh my God, look at this, oh my God, look at that, without doing nothing to defend your children and defend your way of life against these scumbags that are coming into our country. Right, our country ain't gone. It's gone if you let it go, but our country ain't gone.
That's Jamie Michael. Let's speak to him now. Jamie, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. I mean, who'd have thought when you recorded that you were angry about a lot of things? Many people share that anger. You might have used a phrase that some people would have said, well, maybe I'd have used something different. I don't think that's really relevant. But never in your wildest nightmares could you have imagined, while you were recording that in the beautiful countryside of your locality, did you think someone was going to knock on your door at work, arrest you, keep you in custody in the police station for 3 days, and then shy of 3 weeks on remand, and then in a Crown Court trial?
Yeah, it's crazy. And as you know, what's been brought up recently with David Lammy trying to scrap the jury trials. I mean, I could have been looking at a lot different situation than I'm in right now. I could have been sat in a jail if I was put in front of a kind of a leftist judge. And the first two judges that dealt with my case, I feel that they were kind of leaning to the left. And if it was them dealing with it, then I could have been in a different situation. And so, to be talking about taking jury trials away is very, very scary and concerning.
And that would have absolutely been a case where it would have been a solo judge under this new Lammy ruling. You wouldn't have had a jury for that under these new regs. So, you know, who knows, as you rightly say, who knows what might have happened. Before we come on to the football coaching aspect of this, just tell us about what prompted this. Where did your anger specifically come from?
Well, it was in the aftermath of the Southport incident with Axel Rudikvana. I have two young girls myself, one 10 and one 15. And, you know, I was basically just putting myself in the boots of them parents or the little girls who were actually in the class that witnessed the horrific bloody attack on them young girls. And I just felt sick to my stomach, and it was a spur of the moment. I just felt like I wanted to do something locally to get some security in place for the schools and parks. That's what my video was about. And when I you know, talked about them being scumbags, I did say earlier on in the video that the radicalized ones coming into the countries, because there is no doubt there's a couple of radicalized illegal immigrants coming in here.
100%. We've seen that. We've got the proof of that. We've got the receipts for that.
I mean, you can see some of it on the mainstream media, but you know, there's loads. To me, it's really watered down. There's so much you're seeing on social media, and if all the stuff you see on social media was on the mainstream media, then you know it tells a whole different story.
Well, I always make this point, and I'm sure you'd agree, Jamie, that if you have 300 blokes turn up over the channel in a day, even if one of them, just one of them, was radical and had ill intent, whether it was sexual or violent, whatever it is, I don't think the British people should be playing roulette in this way, because that's what we're being asked to do, essentially. I'm sure there's loads of people in those boats who just want to, you know, find a new life, rightly or wrongly, legally or illegally, and get on with things. But you only need one person to cause the problem. And when we've seen, you know, when you look at what's happened, Manchester and goodness knows where else, you know, some horrendous cases, I think the idea that British people would be concerned should not surprise anyone. In fact, anyone with a brain, and you rightly said, you know, many people are too busy watching Love Island, but anyone with a brain should have at least a level of concern over what's happening.
Well, I think they do now. Like, you know what I mean? In this last year's really, things seem to have ramped up with all sorts of different attacks going on, rapes going on. And for us to just expect illegal immigrants to come here and not go through any kind of checks. They want me to go through DBS checks and all sorts of other checks just to coach children, and yet we're expected to just let illegal immigrants come in here without any checks and then spread them amongst our communities. And we're not meant to say anything about that. Yet I'm pulled up for trying to get security in place for schools and parks, trying to look after our children, and now
you're the bad guy, because you've now been barred from coaching at your daughter's football
I'm trying
team.
to look after kids. Now I'm taken away from coaching kids, and I was sent to jail for actually trying to look out for the kids. It's really just all backwards.
It's a bit upside down, isn't it? And so just take us through that point of this story then. While you're awaiting trial, somebody had written a letter to the footballing organisation and said, you know, I don't think this man should be, you know, teaching. They weren't just saying that should be coaching. They weren't just saying because there's a trial. They were already coming out with strong views, suggesting that your views are radical and racial, I think was the term that was used in one letter of complaint. And we now know that that was echoed by the authorities, because they agreed with it and they decided you are no longer fit to coach, even though by this stage you're found not guilty of any offence.
So actually, when I came out of jail, because I was remanded, and that complaint said that I was actually in jail for racial hatred. I wasn't in jail for racial hatred. I was remanded awaiting trial. When I came out, the district side that I was coaching actually said, look, you're innocent till proven guilty. We've never had any complaints about you before. You're a brilliant coach, and we're happy to stick by you until you go to court. Then someone made that complaint, and then it went to all sorts of meetings then, and the police were involved. And even when the police came in, they made a lot of inaccurate statements saying that this was afterwards as well, after my court case. They said that my charge for racial hatred had been dropped, and that I was being done for a different charge of distribution of threatening, abusive, insulting words or images that were likely to cause harassment, alarm and distress, which was completely wrong, completely kind of fabricated in my opinion. Also said that I was sharing English Defence League videos, which was wrong. Also saying that I was in jail for having secret meetings. That was wrong. And now we've gone down the appeals process, and they said, you know, for the last few months that there was nothing wrong in the decision making, but now that we are taking them to court, they're saying they're withdrawing the decision now to make another panel meeting. Because they could see that there were inaccuracies in their initial meeting.
So does that mean you could be back coaching?
Well, we'll see. They just said that they're going to have another... The ban is still in place at the moment, but they're just going to form another panel to have another meeting.
I mean, this is crazy. I mean, this is like, we shouldn't even be talking in these terms, should we? If somebody was watching you and me talking 10 years ago, they'd have think we'd both gone nuts. You know, what are these blokes chatting about there? Another meeting for this, another meeting for that. He said some words on Facebook. And yet I know people can say horrendous things. They can say libelous things. They can say things that were insightful, things that could lead to violence. But you didn't. That was the point. You were found not guilty. I would defy anybody to watch that 12-minute video and say that that was inciting racial hatred. That's just bonkers. No one could come to that conclusion. But yet the Football Association still decreed that there was something about you that was, you know, somehow compromising safeguarding.
It's just the lawfare that's used against you, know, like say the process is the punishment, and they're dragging this out now because they didn't get the not the Football Association, but, you know, the kind of left-wing establishment, and didn't get the decision they wanted against me to get me to go to jail for my video. And now they're using other ways and means of trying to punish me, like, you know, going down the banning me from football. I've also been, and the bank won't tell me why either, but I've been debanked from my bank account as well. And
Wow.
they won't give me a reason why.
You've been debanked because you dared to make a video showing your concerns over illegal immigration.
Well, I'm not saying that, but they debank me and they won't give me a reason.
So they won't give. So I guess your best guess would say that's a bit of a coincidence.
It was around the same time, yeah. Just after the court case, and like I said, this panel, I think it was the kind of the police that was involved. They seemed to be kind of, I'd say, pushing because I had never had any complaints about me before in football. They said I was a really good coach. I never brought politics into football or anything like that. I was never left alone with the children. I passed all my DBS checks.
Yeah.
There was no prior complaints, and yet when I went to this panel meeting, the police had come in there, told them that I'd been, you know, getting done for a lesser charge, sharing certain videos, and I was in jail for secret meetings.
And none of that was true.
All that then was used to make the decision against me in the beginning.
You have an appeal against this. You've got some help and assistance trying to get this heard. I mean, is this something that would end up with you back in court against the Football Association here? The Football Association of Wales or the localised group?
It's going to the local safeguarding board with the council, so I'm not sure where the Welsh Football Association stand in that.
Okay.
We did have a meeting just last week, and they just said that they're going to wait until the outcome of the council meeting. But yeah, it just goes on. And like I said, in my claim, I've got a type of blood cancer. As you can see, my face is quite red, and since all this has been happening for me, my bloods are all over the place. My platelets are through the roof, and it is having a detrimental effect on my health. My daughter has quit football since all this has happened to me as well. So I've kind of lost that opportunity now to go on and coach her what she has left of youth football.
That is devastating.
Plus the kind of, the slander of my name.
Of course. Yeah, because it sticks with some people. That kind of stuff sticks.
These kind of laws are put in place. The safeguarding laws are put in place to protect against abusive, adults. Abusive adults.
But in this case, it was somebody who didn't like your opinion.
Yeah, now they're using that to penalise me for my lawful political views, and that's not what it should be about.
That is extraordinary. We're talking about coaching kids here. I mean, you're not the king or the prime minister. I'm sure you'd make a darn good either of those, by the way. But listen, Jamie, I wish you loads of luck, certainly with your health, and I hope that takes a positive turn for you as well, and with your appeal too. Let's speak again. Jamie Michael. He's the veteran that was banned from coaching kids, his own daughter's football team, because they didn't much like what he'd said on a Facebook post. It's possible. You might not like it. Did it break the law? Does it compromise safeguarding in any shape or form? Let's speak with Andrew Allison, Head of Campaigns at Popular Conservatism. Andrew, good afternoon to you. I mean, this looks to me like a very cut and dry case of free speech unequivocally being compromised here and almost criminalised.
Good afternoon, Ian. I'm almost speechless after watching that interview. I mean, I feel so desperately sorry for him as well, because it's having such a detrimental impact on his health. Well, not just his physical health, I imagine his mental health as well. I mean, everything must be pretty much shot. He mentioned there about the importance of jury trials. I would just say, particularly if your MP is a Labour MP, write to them and tell them this is an 810-year-old right, and this is how important it is. Because I'm absolutely certain that he would not have been found, that he would rather have been found guilty if it had just been in front of a judge rather than in front of 12 of his peers.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned there when you were interviewing Jamie, Ian, that if we were discussing this 10 years ago, we were wondering what on earth was going on.
Yep.
I mean, the last 10 years have seen an acceleration in these sort of cases. And thanks to organisations like the Free Speech Union, which I think everybody should join. I'm certainly a member. But thanks to them, these cases have been thrown out left, right, and centre, and yet the authorities are still pushing this, and they're trying to tell children what to think, and along with Labour trying to put in votes for 16-year-olds. I mean, you don't have to have the IQ of Albert Einstein, Ian, to work out what's going on here.
Well, of course, what makes this so mysterious, Andrew, is that, you know, he was found not guilty. If he'd been found guilty, you might be able to kind of join some dots and say, well, it was bonkers, I don't agree with it, but they had no option because a court deemed him guilty. But he was found not guilty. That's the end of it. You don't get found not guilty and then go on to be penalised by institutions and other organisations, whether it's your bank, I know he's not got evidence of that, but it looks a bit iffy, and whether, you know, the local football association. So he's being punished for something he literally and legally did not do.
Precisely. And that's it's injustice on top of injustice, isn't it? Because he should never have been arrested in the first place. You know, his case should never have gone to court. He should never have been remanded in custody. He was never a danger to the public. And then he thinks, well, I can get my life back in order again. I can get some sort of semblance of normality and go back to doing what I was doing before. And then they pile this injustice on top of it. I mean, I wish him all the luck in the world with his appeal, which he should win.
I hope so. Andrew, great to have you on, sir. Thank you for your time. Andrew Allison, Head of Campaigns at Popular Conservatism. Liam says, so we will trust this former soldier with a gun to protect this country, but he can't be trusted with a bag of balls and a magic sponge. Yeah, and half an orange. It's brilliantly put, Liam. Thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. Your response. You should be really angry. Even if you're a rabid lefty, you should be angry about this, OK? About free speech, about laws that are essentially put in place to stop abuse, you know, child abusers, paedophiles, God knows who else, you know, violent people, those guilty of domestic abuse, that kind of person. You might not agree with him, but surely you agree with the concept of free speech. Surely you're allowed to have a robust view on illegal immigration and not end up in a courtroom, a pair of handcuffs, a courtroom, a prison cell, and then banned from working with kids, despite that your DBS check comes back perfectly fine. You've been doing it for years. That, kids, is the dictionary definition of an outrage. 0344 499 1000.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Let's go to your calls. Mark's in Lincolnshire. What have you got for us, Mark? Afternoon to you.
Hello, Mr. Collins.
Hello.
How are you today?
Yeah, good as gold. What are you thinking?
Right, obviously this Jamie Michaels thing. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like the whole point of what they're doing with the jury trials, as far as I'm concerned. You know, you have to get rid of jury trials in order to persecute your population at the end of the day. Because as your last guest was saying, I have, without a shadow of a doubt, if this had been just down to a judge, he'd be in prison now. I'm convinced of that.
Why do you think? Do you think that's because the judge would have gone by the literal letter of the law with no wiggle room, or because the judge was an ardent lefty, as the phrase goes?
Both.
Because I mean, most judges are probably not ardent lefties. You know, there's a bit of an urban myth around that, but they are likely to impose the very letter of the law, which a jury have a bit more wiggle room with.
I'm not entirely certain on that, because you can say, you know, they're not. Most of them aren't ardent lefties, but.
I mean, it'd be a bit weird, wouldn't it, that if most judges turned out to be old lefties? I mean, I don't know where that would come from. In fact, we had a message last week from a woman who said, I've worked in a court, a Crown Court for 20 years. She said, I've never met one of these lefty judges anywhere.
The problem is, they're kind of a replica of Parliament at the end of the day. And when you've got an entire Parliament that's, for example, against, you know, Brexit.
Yeah, but they would say they're anything but that. They would resent the idea. They'd sue us for suggesting that they're anything to do with Parliament. They're completely autonomous of Parliament. That would be their argument.
Well, yeah, that would be their argument. It'd be a load of crap, basically, because at the end of the day, it didn't take much from Starmer, did it, after Southport? The full force of the law, and we saw exactly that, more than willing to go along with what Starmer was asking them to do. You know, when you're having people banged up for, you know, sentences for the stupidest of things, the most, you know...
Yeah, but not to defend that, because I don't defend hardly anyone who went to jail at that. I don't defend the decision to send hardly anyone to jail. I mean, in fact, I can't think of a case that where custody was the right answer. But, of course, it has happened before under the Tories. When there's a riot, that's when the big sentences are wheeled out.
Yeah, because the state don't like, you know, pushback, shall we say.
Well, they don't like crimes against the state, you know, and whether you're like you know, if you walk into a courtroom now, if you went down to Lincoln Crown Court, Mark, this afternoon and started effing and jeffing at the judge, you'd be in a pair of cuffs in about 10 minutes and serving about 3 weeks, because it's a crime against the system. You're right about that bit.
Yeah, because, as I say, at the end of the day, Ian, it's just, you know, if you want, we live in a country where we prosecute more people for speech infractions than any other country in the world. You know, so if you want to pursue that, then you have to get rid of juries, don't you? Because juries acquit on things.
Yeah, but
like
would they? I mean, it's a lot of money to go to just because of what people are saying on Twitter. I mean, of all of David Lammy's crazy plans. By the way, I don't think David Lammy even thought about this in his life. I mean, this is likely there's a whole civil service that are behind this. But I mean, would they go to all that trouble just because of one particular element of criminality? What people say on Twitter?
Yes, they would. You know, when you've got counts, I've forgotten how many times I've seen cases where these same judges are given suspended sentences for example, migrant rapists, light sentences for, you know, migrants or foreign, you know, murderers. You know, there was a guy, wasn't it, quite recently, some young lad was killed, some native lad was killed by 2 black guys. And one of them got out. He was in there for 2 years. That's all he did. 2 years. And they absolutely battered that kid. you know, it just beggars belief, because I can remember it, because at the time the parents were going absolutely spare about it.
Yeah, no, but there's no, you know, I can never remember a time, Mark, when we used to do whole debates on, you know, why is it that somebody gets this for this crime and that for... This was pre-talking about anything to do with immigration or whatever. And you do often find, you know, when they say, oh, this judge that just jailed somebody for what they said on Twitter, then went ahead and, you know, like a year ago, let a paedophile go free. But then you also find, if you look a little deeper, that 2 years before that, he jailed a paedophile for life. You know, we'd be here forever on that one. But listen, Mark, always good to talk. Thank you very much indeed for that. We'll talk to Chris in a few moments. Bear with us, Chris. We know you've got a lot to say. We don't want to just give you 40 seconds on it. That'd be bizarre. Betty says, I've worked and lived in a lot stricter or dodgy countries, and all we see in the last 12 months are the same tactics of those regimes, same games and rules, just different taboos. Where's the CIA to overthrow and oppressive regimes when you need them? And Amanda says, it's absolutely terrifying to see this once great country slowly being taken over by Marxist beliefs and control, not to mention how our school children and university students are being brainwashed to the same ends. This is, if there's not a theory for this, I think it's something like trigger word theory. There's not some, you know, convoluted or Starmer talk to that judge and that judge talk to the Football Association. It ain't that. Something else is going on. It goes back, I reckon, a good decade or more. I'll tell you why after the news at 2, which is next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome back. Loads to get through. More of your comments on the way in a couple of moments. We are discussing the former Royal Marine barred from working with kids after protesting illegal immigration. This has naturally sparked a free speech row. This was seen as a safeguarding issue by his local football association. Is that now being weaponised? Meanwhile, Joey Barton has just received a suspended jail sentence for, quote, grossly offensive posts. Is this proof that Britain is criminalising free speech as well? What is going on here? I mean, I'm not going to defend Barton in any shape. Well, he's a pretty grim old character. But the wider issue isn't whether or not you like someone. It's the wider issue of free speech. Also this afternoon, Nigel Farage has been reported to the police by a former Reform campaigner over allegedly misreported election expenses in Clacton. This is an ex-councillor who claims local spending was logged as national spending, which breaches electoral law. He sent documents to the Met. Where does the story go next? Mr Farage denies any knowledge of it himself, which is probably the case, but nonetheless, there is an issue still to be resolved. And Labour is under fire for pushing pubs and bars to hire more teenagers to help cut youth unemployment. This comes as hospitality is still reeling from tax rises. I'm thinking national insurance, minimum wage came around the corner, increases there as well, which in some of those instances is forcing hospitality to lose members of staff. You can't make this stuff up. We'll have details on that in a couple of moments' time. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. And this one in from Rachel, who says, I find the ex-Marine from Wales being put on remand or even being arrested outrageous. Lots of us feel and say things much similar, but maybe in a more sophisticated way. I'm not a foil hat wearer, but anybody who isn't outraged and worried by this attack on the ex-Marine is very foolish. I couldn't agree more with that, Rachel. I'd said it in the last hour. Even if you're an absolute ardent left-winger, you should be outraged at what happened there, based on his views on illegal immigration that he posted on his own Facebook for people who follow him to see. And that was found, by the way, to be a non-criminal offence. He was found not guilty. They even took it all the way to a court. And he was found not guilty. It took the jury just under, you ready for this, 17 minutes to decide. They'd hardly sat down in the deliberation room and found him not guilty. But his local football association said, you still can't coach the kids. He used to coach his daughter's football team. Why not? Well, you know, after what you said. No, found not guilty of that, mate. So, yeah, but even so, what sort of world are we living in, for goodness sake? Even so? We'll come back to your calls and comments on that, and we've got lots of them. Meantime, this story. The government wants jobless youths on benefits to get into work in pubs and restaurants to help curb the massive welfare bill. However, in the hospitality industry, which Labour has arguably had a hand in killing over the last 18 months, job prospects are minimal and would leave many benefit claimants worse off than if they stayed at home. So, what have we got going on here? We'll speak to Rupert Lowe in just a second. But joining us first is the CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association, Michael Kill. Michael, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
I mean, industries in this area are already well under the cosh for a whole load of reasons. We had the national insurance rise. We've now had a minimum wage rise. We've got new rules and regs on employees' rights. So the industry that was struggling already is struggling even more. And then along comes some bright spark and says, no, you've got to hire more teenagers. I mean, pubs and restaurants aren't against hiring teenagers, of course, but to be compelled to do it, that would be a whole different ballgame.
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, we're the biggest employer of 18 to 30-year-olds. That's clear. We've lost over 100,000 jobs purely for the fact of the constraints around taxation, people having to cut from the last autumn budget to this autumn budget, which is now going to generate even further challenges, as you can appreciate. So it seems somewhat surreal that they have the answer in their hands. They've already sort of quashed the opportunity, and now they're trying to create a funded mechanism to bring back people into work. The crazy bit about it is save the money, give us a fairer tax position, and we'll do the job for you. I think is the real simple way of looking at this. You know, we'll increase revenue, we'll give more back to the Treasury, we'll protect jobs, and we'll reduce that welfare spending. But just support businesses, and we will support the people within those businesses. That's the crazy bit about this intention from government.
Yeah, there never seems to have been. I know every industry would probably argue something similar in this respect, Michael, but there does seem to be a sort of a lack of understanding as to what it takes to run a business. I don't know whether it's the fact that the entire cabinet have never run anything themselves, but perhaps this predates, to be fair, might predate this government. I don't know. But it's that, isn't it? As you rightly say, it's the wider infrastructure of running a business, particularly hospitality, which is vulnerable for all sorts of reasons, that is sort of missed in the wider equation here.
Well, there's a huge disconnect. I mean, we always talk about it in the context of living in a bubble. In many respects, and I think the challenge that we have out there, as we said, in terms of the modelling or the impact assessment that we would look at after the last autumn budget, where we saw the NIC contributions for employers to go up, and everyone was suggesting that it would be okay, but the reality is industry on the ground saw the very clear fact that we would have to scale back. Many people have had to place a lot more pressure on their annually paid staff. Hours have had to be cut, you know, and again, once we get to April and the national minimum wage goes up, it's going to be pressure again. And I think the reality is everybody wants to pay people more money or the best that they can. But the challenge we have in such an economically challenging environment, it's very difficult. We can't do it if the businesses can't afford it. All that's going to happen is it's going to generate losses of businesses or losses of jobs. And all we're doing now is going, right, we're going to pay 800 million to get the people back into work that we've just taken out, to be honest.
Indeed. And of course, you know, there is the other little matter that, the industry might want to say in who they employ rather than perhaps being forced. You know, here comes Joe, you know, he's a great guy, but he wants to work in IT, has zero interest in hospitality, wouldn't know how to pull a pint, doesn't even drink, you know, God knows what. I mean, you'd like to think that the people are going into hospitality, to a degree at least, are there because they kind of want to be rather than forced by a government initiative.
Well, the devil is in the detail with all of this, as you can imagine. I mean, we're talking in the context of this being mandated or people being forced to go into these working environments. But the reality is you're right. There is horses for courses. We need to make sure that they're the right people walking into these environments. Hospitality, service, this is all about personalities and people who can deliver at the optimum level to sustain custom and create that environment that we all sort of love. And I've been a huge part of for the last sort of 30, 35 years. So for me, it's a real worry that it is going to be this thing about mandation. And the other thing that I think is really important to recognise is we have the answers at our hands. We just need a balanced tax system. It's clear, and it seems like we're giving out money and taking it away at the same time, and it just seems very chaotic. And I think we just need some clear direction from Cabinet, from the Prime Minister, that just lets us understand that they're listening, because at the moment they categorically aren't.
Yeah. Bang on, Michael. Thank you for that. Michael Kill is from the Nighttime Industries Association. Let's get a word from Rupert Lowe, the MP, independent MP, leader of Restore Britain. Always good to have you on, Rupert. I was alluding there to the front bench, never having run anything in their life. You have a fairly glowing CV in running lots of things, owning businesses, building them up from nothing, employing people. You've made a few quid along the way as well. So you're pretty well qualified in that arena. Does it, just on that specific point, does it strike you as a little bit odd when you look at the current front bench that, as far as I can work out, I'm not being mischievous here, I don't think I've made this up, I don't think any of them have ever run a bath?
Well, I think, Ian, the collective knowledge of the front bench, or business knowledge of the front bench, could be written on the back of a postage stamp. Most of them have clambered their way up the greasy public sector pole. And as a result of that, they're completely out of touch with the real world, and they're completely out of touch with the effects of the various sort of lunacy that they inflict on the private sector. I thought Michael Kill was very sensible in what he said. He's absolutely right, and I think the key sort of statement I like here is Ronald Reagan's statement when he speaks about socialism, and what he said was, if it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it, and when it stops moving, subsidize it. That's what he said, and I think that says it all very aptly. And I mean, what's happening here is you've got a war going on between the public sector and the private sector, And whereas the public sector is supposed to serve the private sector, what's happened is the public sector has become the enemy of the private sector. And I see this, and I sit on the Public Accounts Committee. The amounts of waste and incompetence which are evident throughout all organs of the state are just frightening. And as a result of that, they have to tax people more, or tax all of us more, which is effectively damaging the interests of businesses, and in particular here, the hospitality industry. And what they're now trying to do is then centrally plan some form of subsidized employment for people who they've forced out of work because the private sector can't employ them, but they just can't help inserting themselves into the chain. And it's exactly what happened under communism, Ian, and I'm afraid the script will end in the same way if we allow it to go on. So that's why we've got some common sense, hopefully emanating from Restore Britain, and I urge everybody to join as quickly as possible. And then with a mass movement, we can defeat this cancer which is killing Britain.
And of course, it's, you know, I always thought it wasn't that hard to work this bit out, but it clearly eludes the collective brains and thinking of the current government. But, you know, if you want to help Britain, if you want to get Britain back on its feet, by having huge swathes of regulation, firstly, is clearly not a good thing. Having taxation systems, whether it's business rates, you know, local taxation, whatever it happens to be, the national insurance hike, the minimum wage problem, all of those things, you know, my 11-year-old could work out that everything I've just listed there, is that going to help business or is it going to curtail business? And the answer is the latter every day.
Yes, I mean, look, the headwinds that businesses are now facing is so huge that I can tell you for a fact, I was talking to some colleagues this morning, people are leaving the country in droves. They're not going to stay here. They are not going to stay here and fund this ridiculous sort of statism, this collectivism which is growing. And I'm afraid it's just going to get worse and worse if we allow it to continue. So people have got to, as I've always said, start standing up to this, start fighting it. And what we've got to do is see a sort of Margaret Thatcher-like empowerment of the private sector, which effectively gets directed investment from the private sector into long-term projects, into long-term employment, and it actually then drives sustainable growth. What happens with government initiatives, they're like fads. They use taxpayers' money, they misdirect it. It basically, very briefly, has an effect. It fizzles out, and then they move on to the next thing, because I think the attention span of Westminster is about a half a day. And the media circus moves on, and everybody forgets about what's been said.
Yeah.
And actually what you do need is exactly what Rachel Reeves is killing, which is the family farms, the family businesses, the backbone of Britain, the people who hold our communities together, and the people who ultimately invest long term because they believe in the country. But people don't believe in the country now. So what we're seeing is huge numbers of rainmakers leaving the country, taking their brain power, taking their money, and ultimately, I'm afraid, the rest of the country will be the loser, because the people who leave first are the most able. They can see what's happening, and they're going to help other countries to generate wealth. We're already seeing it. You know, we're seeing it in countries like Greece, in countries like Dubai, in countries like Italy. You know, Milan is benefiting from the huge British brain drain.
Yeah.
And in today's digital world, Ian, you don't have to live in this country. So governments should be making it attractive for people to live here. They should be encouraging brain power to come and contribute. And that is not done by overtaxing people to fund a sort of centrally planned circus which wastes people's money and oppresses them.
Yeah.
So, no, we're in a bad shape. And if you look at what's happened, as you said earlier, to Joey Barton, and a number of other people like Lucy Connolly for social media posts. I mean, at the end of the day, we're having our freedoms taken away. We're being taxed into oblivion. We're being monitored on facial CCTV. And now they're trying to force digital ID on us. I mean, where's all this going, Ian? Yeah. Is it a sort of communist-style Politburo run by Keir Starmer?
I mean, if it's not, it bloody well looks like one, doesn't it? Let's say that much.
Yeah.
Just a final point, Rupert, unconnected to this. I noticed you were posting this morning and talking about your own independent rape gang inquiry, which you have set up. You've now formally invited Jess Phillips, who's I think still the Women and Safeguarding Minister, to the inquiry, to the hearings in February. You say we hope she will take the time to give evidence. Have you heard back from Jess Phillips on this yet?
Well, you probably know that I invited her to participate when I spoke in Parliament, and she said she would come back to me. She hasn't done that. So we are, as you say, we're setting out our 2 weeks of hearings, which are going to happen from the beginning for the first 2 weeks of February. We've got our KC who's going to do it and then finish a very hard-hitting report, because what we found is pretty vile. And we thought the least we could do is invite those people who've promised us a statutory inquiry, at least that they can then come and participate in our private inquiry, which is funded with a very generous £600,000 donated by 20,000 people who are concerned about what's happening.
Yeah.
So we thought we would be doing less than our duty not to invite them. I don't expect them to come. They have shown very little intellectual appetite in participating in what we're doing. I suspect that their statutory inquiry, which was announced, I think it was 4 or 5 months ago now, and as far as I'm aware, no progress has been made. I think that was announced to try and draw the teeth of our inquiry, and I got a lot of pressure at the time for us to abandon ours and leave it to the state. Well, we're not going to do that, because the state has singularly failed to address this issue, which has been going on for 25 years, and more concerningly, is still going on today.
Yeah.
So, and despite what Khan says, it's happening in London everywhere. So I think we have a major problem in this country when you have this mass rape of white working class girls going on systemically by largely Pakistani Muslim rape gangs. And then you have our citizens being sent to prison for social media posts. I mean, doesn't that just make a mockery of the whole thing?
Yeah, and social media posts often pointing out the very thing you've just referenced. So just to compound the grim irony of the whole thing. Rupert, great to have you on as ever. Very common sense words from Rupert Lowe, the independent MP. He's leader of Restore Britain. Thoughts on what he had to say on both of those issues as well. 0344 499 1000. Lots more to get through as well. This comes in from John in Carmarthen, who says, enjoying the show, if you are outspoken about the danger to kids from unvetted illegal migrants, you are a danger to their welfare. What sort of upside down world are we living in? This guy was a Royal Marine, some of the hardest men on the planet. He's shown he passionately cares about the welfare of kids under his supervision. This guy would give his own life to protect these kids. The authorities and council members who have done this to him are the real threats here. I am so angry about this. These cases are the ones that carry sentences of up to 2 years. I feel that Lammy and co want to get rid of juries to lock up more people like Jamie Michael, whose crime is honest common sense and speaking out of step with the liberal elites. Jamie, thank you for your service. By the way, my father was a veteran too. World War II and career. He fought against both Nazis and communists. He would see you as a hero, as should we all. You are a credit to humanity. Well said, John in Carmarthen. Thank you for that. More calls on that very issue coming next on Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is Britain criminalising free speech? We're putting that question out there in reference to the just the curious case of Jamie Michael, who was the Iraq, we spoke to him in the last hour if you didn't hear it, Iraq veteran who he posted something on Facebook. It wasn't even, like sometimes something's posted on Facebook and you go, or Twitter or wherever, and you go, OK, I mean, it's clearly a racist comment or it's clearly an insightful comment and nobody would defend it, you know, but we're not going to send people to jail. I mean, Lucy Connolly case is a classic case of that. Even she wouldn't defend the words that she wrote. It was pretty grim stuff. But she shouldn't have gone to jail for that. Was she really inciting racial hatred? Well, you can argue that point, but jail was no place. But this is more mysterious because there's not really anything in fact, there's nothing in the video that he put up that could possibly lead anyone with a brain to say this man was inciting racial hatred. I mean, it would be beyond extraordinary if you could have looked at this post and extrapolate that opinion. In fact, if you did extrapolate that, there is something wrong with you. You might not have liked it, you might not have agreed with it. Fine, that's called free speech. The idea that this would end up with an arrest, it would end up with a court case. It would, as it turned out, the jury found him not guilty very quickly, but that wasn't the end of it because he's now discovered he's not allowed, because of safeguarding issues, to continue to be a coach for kids football. And interestingly, it was his daughter's football team where he was a coach. So he can't do that anymore. Safeguarding issue. A lot of people very upset about what he said. Wow. I'd round all those people up and stick them in clink, to be honest. Dylan is in Newport. Dylan, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tom. What I would like to say is that what that bloke put up on Facebook is what everybody's thinking, but just is afraid to say it. I live in Newport, and Newport has changed so much in the space of 7 years, where you just have people wandering the streets. They have nowhere to go. There is nowhere or nobody of people that helps them to integrate. I mean, I legally migrated from the Caribbean to the UK, but it's frightening. And what he said, it's what a lot of us think, but just didn't say it. So I mean,
he's making a very simple point, isn't he? That if you have, we've had over 60,000 young men enter the UK on small boats since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. We have no idea who they are. We've got no idea really where they came from. Who wouldn't question that?
Correct. But what I don't think politicians look at, a lot of these people that come through on small boats deliberately do it because they cannot come through a checkpoint. Correct. Because obviously of the checks and balances and the visa 100%. Requirements and correct. So hence reasoning for that.
Indeed.
But
Go on, Dylan.
But I do mean what is happening to him. He's being villainized. He is, the law is being weaponized. And quite honestly, my heart went out for him, having served his country, and
Sure.
he's now trying to serve his community by volunteering, coaching his local team. And it's horrendous what's being done to him.
It is absolutely horrendous. Great point. Dylan, thank you. Your wise words, sir. Really appreciate your call too. 0344 499 1000. Chris is in Bournemouth on this point. What have you got for us, Chris? Hi.
Afternoon, Ian.
What are you thinking?
Every morning, mate, I dread opening my eyes in this country. This man and his Justice Secretary, I don't know where he got his Justice Secretary from, to be quite honest, because the only thing he's good at is releasing prisoners before they shouldn't be released.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few of those.
Oh, aye. And Keir Starmer himself, the way he's carrying on, he is becoming this country's dictator. Not a prime minister, a dictator. And it's you will do as I say and not as I do. The man is a liability to this country. And I put this on the table, Ian. I will not be forced out of my country by people like that. This is my country. I was born, I was bred in this country, and I will not leave this country for him.
What do you think of the wider issue, Chris, of this free speech thing? Because, I don't want to defend Starmer in any way, but a lot of this goes back before, we were talking about these kind of, Facebook post problems before Starmer.
What free speech is it, Ian? We haven't got any free speech in this country anymore.
It's gone.
We don't do...
Where do you...
been in power...
But it's even before that. I mean, we had police turning up at people's houses before Starmer was elected, right? I mean, we used to talk about it all the time. There was the rainbow flag incident. I think, I've got a feeling Lawrence Fox was involved slightly in that, where some people, I think the arresting officer or the investigator even said, somebody is offended by it. I mean, really?
They need to get a life, Ian.
Well, You're spot on. Chris, your phone line, sadly, is getting the better of us, but thank you to Chris in Bournemouth. We've got a lot of that going on at the moment, haven't we? Where you look back at I don't know how many hundreds of examples you would find. The most recent one was the woman in the bath who, used a derogatory term for gay people, or a gay man, and then was dropped in it by her friend. It was a private message between two people. And I think it was 11 coppers. She was in the bath. 11 officers. Where does the 11 get? I never understand this. If a community support officer went round there and went, hello, mate, someone's got the ump about. So even that would be bizarre. But 11, you don't get 11 if your house is burgled. You don't get 11 if your car is nicked. You don't get 11 if somebody vandalises your golden retriever. You don't get 11 for anything. Unless you use a bad word on, I don't know, could be a WhatsApp group, could be anything at all. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Let's move to this story. We're going to come back to your calls on the former squaddy and other issues up and running. But what is becoming a warhorse for this Labour government, determined to get onto the statute books by any means necessary, is the new definition of Islamophobia. It's been in the works seemingly since Labour took power. They do seem rather wedded to this very specific area. Critics are slamming the definition as a kind of blasphemy law by the back door that will ban legitimate criticism and silence women's rights. Let's get a word from Lubna Zaidi, who's a former Apprentice star, of course, and commentator. Lubna, good afternoon to you.
Thank you. Yes, hello.
Nice to have you with us. I didn't even know where to begin with this. It does seem that this has been... they've only been in power 18 months. This feels like this has been going on for 18 years. Why do you think this government are wedded to the idea of being able to nail down a particular definition of this word, over and above perhaps other religions or issues?
I do not trust Labour at all. I think anything they touch turns into human feces. And I feel like a lot of the actions are more for vote banks, essentially. I find it very suspicious personally that the grooming gang inquiry hasn't made much progress at all. It's been more than 6 months now, and it feels like they're more interested in getting any kind of Islamophobia law in place, which actually may then hinder any inquiry.
Of course.
So I just find it really frustrating, because I think what we need to understand is, what is their intent? Are they trying to safeguard Muslims? Well, that's not going to work, is it? Because I come from this faith, although I'm not that religious. I come from this faith. People are going to be even more resentful of Muslims being perceived to be given any kind of special treatment. So I just feel like I don't think it's actually going to achieve what they're saying they're going to achieve. And that makes me personally very suspicious of their whole intent behind this whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, and I know you've got your own experience. You've even had death threats because you talked out about Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs. This was in Luton, right?
Yeah, it wasn't just death threats. So I've had to flee my hometown of Luton. I lived there for 40 years, and then I had to leave there because of the death threats. And this is what really shocked me about the community, because I thought, I'm going to come out and I'm going to condemn the grooming gangs. I'm going to encourage other Muslim Pakistanis to condemn it as well. But the experience that I had is where a lot of the people from the community, they just didn't want to talk about it. Actually, if you speak about it, they find that very offensive, and they have no interest in engaging in any kind of dialogue in this topic. And for me, that's concerning. So when I'm hearing about Labour bringing any kind of Islamophobia definition, and then when I'm hearing seeing the lack of any progress in the grooming gang inquiry, I just find the whole thing very suspicious, and that's very, very sad, because the victims, or I should say survivors, need justice. And currently, we're probably going to see more victims, right? Because nothing's happened. No progress has been made. So I just feel like, I don't know, that there seems to be a lack of will to work on the right things. And they're more interested in the definition of Islamophobia, which is something I'm personally quite afraid of, because I've seen this play out in Pakistan, which is the country of my heritage, where people are falsely accused of blasphemy all the time, just to silence them. Even if you haven't done blasphemy, you can get accused of it. A mob will come and lynch you, and that's the end of your life. So, I mean, if we start bringing in definitions of Islamophobia now, I fear that in the next 20 years' time, we may look a bit similar to Afghanistan.
It is quite extraordinary. I mean, as you rightly say, the timing of these two things, that when this Pakistani Muslim grooming gang issue that you've just alluded to, and then this definition all kind of happening in kind of simultaneously, that's, you know, maybe it's just a terrible coincidence, but it's an awful one, that's for sure. I mean, the other point, if they are scared about this, when we, had huge, not just British, but global investigations into kind of grooming gang and child sex abuse in the Catholic Church, I don't think many people were complaining about raising the various issues that linked it together, and of course there were issues that linked it together. In some cases, I don't believe they represented Catholicism no more than I think that a grooming gang abuser represents Islam. But you would still raise these points, of course you would. You know, you'd be a rubbish detective, wouldn't you, if you somehow forgot to mention commonality among offenders. Of course you would. And thirdly, I think the other really important point, Lubna, is that, you know, when it comes to religion, you know, satirising religion has, you know, always been a thing, you know, from Monty Python and The Life of Brian and goodness knows what else with Christianity. They got into all sorts of trouble over that at the time. People were losing their mind. Oh, my goodness, you can't do this. It's blasphemy and it's terrible. You know, we should be, surely in a free society, religion should be one of the first things that we're allowed to question robustly. And if that means a bit of lampooning and satirising, so who cares?
I think Muslims do care, and I would say that this is where generally Muslims are. It doesn't matter whether you're a Muslim from Pakistan or whether you're a Muslim from another one of the 50+ Muslim countries. I would say the tolerance levels are very, very low, and I would say they're non-existent. So, and that is my concern about the mass migration, especially from the fake asylum seekers, is these people are not here, it seems, to integrate and assimilate, and they are coming from cultures like, if I give an example of Pakistan, which is the country of my heritage, the tolerance levels, the culture, the mindset is very different. And when we've got a lot of these people coming here, instead of signaling to them that they need to integrate, they need to assimilate, or don't come here, by having definitions like Islamophobia definition, I don't see how that is signaling to them that they need to integrate and assimilate. It's giving the opposite, right, signal. So I feel like we sadly have a government, and we've had governments, successive governments as well, that have been, it's like the blind leading the blind. They're running around like headless chickens. They don't know what they're doing. There's no strategy in terms of what this country, the direction of the country, what we need to do. There's no cause and effect. They're not really considering the impact of some of their decisions, right? It's not just about having an Islamophobia definition. It is about, what is the intent? Is this to do with politics more than actually safeguarding Muslims? Also, what is the effectiveness of this definition going to be, right? Is it even going to be effective? I feel it's going to cause more resentment towards the Muslim community, which I am part of. People are already fed up, right? They see Muslims as a community that is a protected community when they should be treated like everyone else. It's not going to help in that area. And then also the side effects. So I'm concerned about, I want a full inquiry with the grooming gangs. I've got children myself. I think it's absolutely disgusting. This whole, it seems to be a cover up, right? So we need to give the victims justice now. There seems to be no will to do that. So I feel like side effects of having Islamophobia definition may be that people are going to use that as an excuse now to further cover up.
Yeah.
Any kind of grooming gangs and links. So I'm you know, and then there was a case of Sarah Sharif as well, whose father had made her wear the hijab to cover up her bruises. We've had the instance of the charity run where women weren't allowed to run and participate, and we've got Sharia courts. We've got, you know, we know this, right? It's not anything hidden that Muslim men are allowed to have 4 wives. So I mean, at what point are we gonna, if we now have an Islamophobia definition, at what point does that get so big where then we have 2 different laws in this country, and then who decides which law prevails? And it's going to get really confusing, and it's going to get really messy, I think, and it's completely unnecessary. I do not trust Labour at all. It's very suspicious behaviour.
How rare is your voice in the Muslim community? But I mean, outwardly, I would imagine it's very rare. But inwardly, when you talk to people, you know, off the record, as it were, particularly on things like grooming gangs, what sort of agreement, if at all, do you get?
My voice is so rare that I sometimes feel I'm the only one. I have had good progressive Muslims and Pakistanis come on my YouTube channel, and they have shared similar views to me in terms of the concerns about mass migration and the grooming gangs and all those kind of things. However, sadly, those people are very few in number. I would personally like to see more evidence of there being more open-minded Muslims and Pakistanis, and that's why I have a YouTube channel, and I'm trying to encourage them to come and speak. But my voice is rare. I'm not going to pretend that the tolerance levels are high and that everyone is sharing, similar views to me. I would say this is the problem with having mass migration, and that is my personal concerns, because I've been indoctrinated as a child as well. It's taken me decades to come out of my own indoctrination, because I see myself as someone who's a leader. I'm not a sheep. I like to think for myself, but a lot of times when you're indoctrinated as a child, you're in your echo chamber. It's very difficult to come out of. And with more people coming in who are where there's a culture clash, and the government not having the processes and procedures in place to integrate and assimilate these people, things are only going to get worse. And voices like mine will get silenced with any kind of Islamophobia definition. Even though I'm a Muslim myself, people will use this as an excuse to silence me. And my concern is that the women's rights, for example, are non-existent under any kind of Islamophobia definition, because there will be misogynistic men who will use this to their advantage. And I don't understand what are we trying to do in this country? Are we trying to safeguard children and women and protect innocent people, or are we trying to, I don't know, mess this country up? It just seems like a complete shambles.
Yeah, well, it's certainly that. Listen, great to have you on, Lubna. Really lovely to speak, and let's speak again. I'll remind people to look at your YouTube channel as well, which is called Candid with Lubna. That's Lubna, Candid with Lubna. An interesting voice coming from a Muslim perspective, as she said. She's not particularly religious, but nonetheless, that is her faith, her country of origin, her family lineage is Pakistani. So she knows it all. She is aware of it all. She's lived it all. She's not some outsider that has come to this conclusion. Your thoughts on that and the definition of Islamophobia thing? Is like, if a bloke can have 4 wives, I think that's a bit weird, right? I genuinely think that's a bit weird. I think that carries with it so many tentacles of questions. That's a bit weird, okay? Now, I know that the average Muslim bloke has not got 4 wives, and I'm pretty sure most of them don't want 4 wives. I know a lot of blokes married who don't want 1 wife. So, I get all of that. If you were to mock that and have a jibe at that, is that going to be Islamophobic? Because you could have a lot of fun with the bloke with 4 wives. I mean, couldn't you? I mean, you could go on forever. We could just sit there. If we got the beers in, it'd be even funnier. You could really crack on with the 4-wife routine. And it would be never ending. If we did a competition, your best one-liners on the 4-wife thing, I mean, you'd be here forever. Is it going to be one of those things, though, where suddenly this new rule comes out, definition of Islamophobia, yeah, I'm afraid it's going to cover the 4-wife thing. I mean, we had 4 candles and nobody worried about that. It's a great comedy sketch. Surely we can have 4 wives. That's got to be a belter. That writes itself almost. Will that fall under this definition? On a more serious point, of course, when you get into the issue of grooming gangs, is this new definition going to somehow either dilute or, more worryingly, curtail your right to a robust and honest opinion, because you will be breaching a different law? You can't really say that, can you? Well, anyone with a brain isn't going to say all Muslim men of Pakistani origin think this or did that. Of course it's not going to, that'd just be a stupid thing to say. But you've got to be able to call it for what it is. And you've got to be able to join dots and make connections and find commonality in those horrendous industrial scale crimes. Anyone knows that, right? There's no one that doesn't know that. But will you be stopped from saying it? That was rather her point. Thank you to her. Let's go back to your calls. Norman is in Dartford. What have you got, Norman? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, it's largely gone unnoticed over the Farage business.
Yeah.
But the moral compass of this country took another dive towards the gutter last week. Early on, we had Reeves and Starmer had the public, but really, more seriously, misled Parliament. So there was an urgent question in Parliament on the Monday morning, asking one of them to attend. Of course, they didn't. Now, years ago, that would have been frowned upon, and we'd have had a robust report from the Speaker saying, why aren't they here? But of course, you won't get one from this bloke, Lindsay Hall, because he's not fit for purpose anyway. And the next step, a day later or 2 days, we get the end of jury service. Yeah. Now, I haven't heard one legal man come on the television and say it's a good idea.
No.
And that chap you had on, Chris Shaw, I thought he was bloody brilliant.
Yeah, it was his finest moment. He was absolutely brilliant. And by a bizarre coincidence, Norman, there's a fella lives down the road from me who I don't know that well. And in fact, I didn't know until age. I used to say hello to him, maybe see him in the pub quickly. Didn't realise this guy is a pretty senior barrister in a KC. And I bumped into him. As I came out of work, I came out the station, I bumped into him the other Friday. And we got chatting about this. And he said, are you talking about it? I said, yeah, we are talking about it. I said, it's outrageous, this. And he said, it's outrageous. And I said, well, how common is that view among your colleagues? He said, all of us. And he's a defender. So, he's one of those apparent, some would say a lefty lawyer. Not that he is, by the way, but that's how, some would define. I've not heard a legal voice say that they agree with this.
No, that's what I mean. But how much debate has there been in Parliament about it?
Yeah.
There hasn't, Ian. I mean,
well, I don't know what's going to happen there. I mean, arguably, we haven't got to that stage yet. I don't know how that element will work and whether this proposal, I would imagine, you've got to somehow, or not imagine, I mean, surely you've got to put this in law. It's not one of those decisions a government can make, like, for example, adding VAT onto private schools and stuff like that. I think this is something that would have to go right the way through the mill, which probably explains why Starmer is cramming the House of Lords with a few more left-leaning characters who like it. But what would be their... look, of all the things I criticise them for, Norman, I don't believe they've introduced this just because of Facebook posts.
No. Well, if you go back to the example, right, Starmer came on the television. He said, I want these people arrested, charged, locked up within a week.
I don't think he said that. I don't think there's any evidence he said that.
He did say something like that, Ian.
That would be extraordinary if he did. He did say, I'm pretty sure he said, he used the term right-wing thugs, and he talked about the full force of the law. There's no doubt about that. But, I wouldn't hold that against him when he was talking about people attacking police officers on the street and setting fire to things. That's... not an unusual response from a Prime Minister. What he failed to do was pick up on the parallel mood about another issue. And, of course, that was that of immigration. I know it was unconventional the way it came around because of mistakes of who was responsible for Southport, but it became an issue. And, therefore, he should have led from the front on that rather than attempt to condemn it. Norman, on that point, we move on. 0344 499 1000. Much more to come from you. We'll go back to your calls. Voice of Doom, day 2, I think it is. Day 2 of the newish one. If you haven't heard it, stand by. It's coming next.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Caroline Kaz in Bedford says, Ian, comes to something when you no longer get 12 people for a jury, but you get 11 police officers to drag you out of a bath for hurty words. Make it make sense. That one, I just can't. I can't fathom and so often they're dealing with people who are demonstrably not confrontational. You know, there are certain areas the old bill hesitate to go into because they're in certain estates, shall we say, that they think it might kick off. So they take a couple of vans worth of coppers. But going round to a couple's house who are parents to 2 young kids because they'd engaged apparently inappropriately on a WhatsApp group, I mean, you kind of know that they're not going to, you know, this is not Bonnie and Clyde that they're going to find when they enter the house. You kind of know a little bit of that up front. And if it was, it would take nothing for an individual copper to, if he should be there at all, I should add, to just leave and say, no, these people are animals. I need backup, Sarge. I've seen the bill. I know how it works. Is that not more reasonable? It just seems odd that amount of people. When it comes to stuff you post online, I mean, we often use that phrase, hurty words. Sometimes you will get words that are more than hurty. They result in something awful. You can put things on social media that are illegal, by the way, or criminal, where the law of the land would want to have a word with you. If you threaten to kill someone, they're going to send the old bill round to your house, and rightly so. If you are overtly racist, then naturally that is a criminal offence, so you will have perhaps a visit from Plod for that as well. If you libel someone, whilst that will become a civil matter, nonetheless, that would be an offence. So there are T's and C's that go with the whole set. We can't write every one of them off with... I saw somebody the other day who was jailed for 20 months or something, and people going, oh, for a few hurty words on Twitter. I mean, this guy had written the most gross anti-Semitic stuff you can possibly conjure up in your head. And he went to... was jail the right place? Was an electronic tag and some other... I don't know. But let's not write off serious abuse as just being hurty words because it happened on Twitter. Because it could be... I mean, the Joey Barton stuff, probably a little bit in that category. Calling somebody a bike nonce is not very nice and deeply unpleasant. I personally don't know anybody who'd read that and think that suggested seriously somebody was a paedophile. It was a reusing of the word. However, that's not how it works, because what then happens, you post something and about 200,000 other people pile in who probably do say stuff. Yeah, not just a bike nonce. All of that, and the aggro, your name or address getting put... You can have a pile-in which would exceed the levels of acceptability. Just because it's on Twitter doesn't mean you can't feel the grief, the jip and the horror of a pile-on of that thing. You can't write that off every time with it's just hurty words. However, sometimes it's just words, not even hurty words, like the story of the Marine. Just before we go to Carl in Liverpool, I'm going to be with you in just 1 second, Carl, on the issue of Nigel Farage. Voice of Doom, Day 2. It's a brand new mystery voice. It's political. Question is, who is this?
Instead of searching for work.
Let's hear that again.
Instead of searching for work.
It's clearly an old clip, OK? I always say dead or alive, young or old, left wing, right wing, whatever. It's a simple question. Who do you think this is?
Instead of searching for work.
87222. Just message, don't call. 87222 if you think you know who this is.
Instead of searching for work.
If we get a right answer, we'll tell you after the news. Let's go to Carl in Liverpool. What have you got for us, Carl? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Yeah, so it's just on Nigel Farage, you know, this he's getting at the moment regarding his past and what have you. As Donald Trump's a friend of his, the more Nigel gets to this abuse from the left and the papers, etc., I think it won't be long before we see Donald Trump step in and say, like, the sort of thing, like, concentrate on the country, Prime Minister, because we all know he doesn't really have a lot of respect for Keir. He has to work with him. I don't think he likes him as a person, although, you know, I just don't think he respects our Prime Minister, Donald Trump. And for all this stick that Nigel has taken, you've got to worry about his safety and all this, because the more it goes on, the more vicious it gets. Yeah. The more people start to believe all this, and you get the loony left, you've got the Islamist extremists in this country. You know, there's a lot of people in this country that really don't like Nigel and reform and what they stand for, and it could get really, really nasty. And I think it won't be long before we see Donald Trump say something about all this. You know, is it
connected though? I mean, if a local councillor or whoever reports Nigel Farage for something, or the Reform Party, then is that connected to a bigger picture? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah. I think I think the longer it goes on, because I think it's going to get more vicious the closer we get to the elections. Ian, and there's been so many cancelled already. You know, we're living it's like we're living under communist rule. You know, it's getting to a point where the British people are now feeling so much pressure, and we are fed up with it. To be honest, why can't they crack on and sort the country out rather than all this bickering?
Good point. Listen, on that point, Carl, love it. Thank you very much indeed. That's Carl in Liverpool. More calls from you on the way. Cracking third hour coming up. And the voice of doom. Who is this?
Instead of searching for work.
Right now, let's get the news at 3.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, yes. Welcome back to the home of common sense. Loads together. We continue to take your calls, by the way, on the former Royal Marine being barred from working with children after protesting against illegal immigration. It's naturally sparked a bit of a free speech row. Tying into that, Joey Barton's received a suspended jail sentence for, quote, grossly offensive posts. Is it proof that Britain is criminalising free speech? He hasn't been sent to jail, but it is a suspended sentence. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage has been reported to police by a former Reform campaigner over alleged misreported election expenses in Clacton. We'll take a look at that story in some more detail. And post-pandemic Britain is lonelier than ever. Adults who often feel lonely have jumped from 6% in 2019 to 24%, matching the levels of March 2020. That's the kind of COVID time. The stereotype that older people are the loneliest doesn't hold either, with only 43% of over 65 saying they are, suggesting the real problem lies elsewhere. But where does it lie? We'll have details on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Gary and Polly say, Ian, I think this free speech problem goes back to lockdown, where more controls were put in place and we were told to ring the police if we saw people having a party. I think there's something in that, but I think there's a wider issue. There's sort of mission creep, the kind of nudge theory thing that over the years, and this goes back probably more than a decade, where, you know, certain words, I mean, the whole trans subject is quite apt to kind of examine that, where, you know, if for one moment you were to suggest that a bloke in a frock is not a woman, then you were looking at a life sentence. And obviously I over-exaggerate the point. That's slightly gone away, but I think it's institutions, organisations that are scared witless of upsetting someone, thinking, if I get this wrong, so the best course of action is just to fire the person involved or make them person non grata. I think that's what's happening a little bit with the Marine and what occurred with his local football association. More calls on that as well. We'll come back to your phone lines in just a moment. Also this, we've known that the cost of looking after asylum seekers is big, but just how big? Well, this is fascinating because taxpayers are now being asked to cough up 1 billion quid. This is for one place, by the way, as the Home Office signs off one of the most expensive government procurement contracts ever. It's a 10-year deal. It will expand the Heathrow Immigration Removal Centre, a site that can accommodate around about 900 detainees. I did offer earlier to do it for $500 million. I reckon I could make a go of it. Let's speak to a man who knows the detail. Thomas Godfrey, reporter at The Sun, is with us. Tom, I will do it for $500 million, Thomas. I reckon I could do it as well.
I reckon there are many companies that could do it for $500 million, not the comic sort of 10-figure sum. I mean, it's like an Austin Powers film, isn't it? You need to put your sort of little finger to the corner. £1 billion, please.
It's extraordinary. It's a bit like when they say, you know, oh, it costs £100,000 a week per prisoner in jail or something like that, and you go, what? I could do it for half
It's a number
of that.
that's almost too high. It's to the point it's staggering to believe. But this is the provisional sum the Home Office have placed on the 10-year contract to run the Heathrow Immigration Centre. Now, that spans two sites, Colnbrook and Harmondsworth. They're right next to each other by Heathrow Airport. The reason they're at Heathrow Airport is because people go to Heathrow to be deported, although around 60% of people in the Heathrow Centre actually end up being released on immigration bail, rather making the name of a removal centre a bit of a oxymoron.
Indeed.
But this deal will run from 2028 to 2038, and what's really fascinating about the total overall figure is that when this tender was last put out to contract in 2017 for the current deal, it's currently being operated by Mighty, they were offering $525 million for the 10-year span. So even in real terms, the amount the contract has gone up, the taxpayer spending on these two centres, even if you account for inflation, is still 42%.
Wow.
So
it's pretty much doubled.
For one tender, it has pretty much doubled in that time. And as we say now, this is the most lucrative migrant centre contract ever offered by the Home Office, and of course it's all going to be paid for by taxpayers.
So what do I get for my money, Thomas? That's what I want to know.
Well,
what do I get? What is my
£1
billion paying for.
Well, there are a number of these centres across the country, and as part of the contractual obligations, Mighty, or whatever company ends up operating it for the next 10 years, has to provide sort of healthcare services. Earlier this month, this Heathrow Centre was hiring an in-house GP for £140,000 a year, which would give asylum seekers and failed migrants and foreign criminals who are held in these removal centres awaiting their removal to their home country better access to NHS services than the vast majority of people in England living among the general public. Also maths lessons, welfare support, and it proves really that the migrant gravy train here is really far from over. You'll recall in the summer that the Heathrow Centre was offering paid full-time jobs for people who were experts in balloon craft.
£1 an hour or something.
Flower arranging.
Oh, yeah, those jobs, yes.
Jobs for people to come in and teach migrants. And this includes people who've committed the most horrific crimes.
These are people that have been earmarked for removal, right?
They are up for removal.
So these are not people who've just arrived, where you could say, well, maybe there's a terrible case.
This is not a sort of processing centre. A lot of the time, people are in these centres because they're about to be removed, or because their immigration status, whether they've overstayed a visa, whether they've entered as an asylum seeker and no decision has been made, is being determined. Whether, in fact, they're actually going through the tribunal process or the court process to work out whether they can stay in this country. But these are not people who have just come off small boats. Most of the time, they're actually people waiting to go home and be deported. They're leaving this country.
Maths lessons.
And at the same time, we're asking taxpayers to stump up £1 billion for a whole host of things that many people will feel are not actually essential.
Well, I was thinking about the maths lessons. Why would, I don't know, Marcel or Mohammed or I was trying to think of a Spanish name beginning with M.
No, of course. Well, look,
why would they need a maths lesson?
Well, one of the obligations the Home Office say it has and tell contract providers they have to fulfil is to give some sort of support to people so that when they are deported, they can sustain themselves in their home country. It's why we get the stories of foreign criminals being given up to £3,000 now to leave Britain, to agree to be deported, and they can use that money in their home country to set themselves up, which actually, in the view of the government, avoids them trying to make the trip back to the UK and become a burden on the taxpayer again. Obviously, when it goes too far, you end up with things like floristry and flower arranging being taught in immigration detention centres. I'm sure even in countries where asylum seekers come from, they are able to get that sort of education if they so wanted it. If they even wanted it. Many of them, I imagine, would probably not even be paying attention.
I reckon if I go down to Karachi High Street, there's probably no florist there. That's all I'm saying. There is another story, Thomas, as well here that's worth a look at as well. And this is extraordinary. The migrants granted asylum without the need for face-to-face interviews. I mean, that has blown my mind, that you wouldn't have to actually sit down with an individual. You could do it on Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you can actually just submit written evidence. And if it's strong enough, if your case is good enough, effectively, Ian, if you hit all the right notes for the Home Office decision makers, you can just be given asylum, protected status in this country without actually even being probed on anything, without anyone actually, even if you have a legitimate claim, sitting you down and talking through the steps, talking through the process, trying to ask you questions. Because if you have a legitimate claim, then sure, you would get through that process, absolutely. But if you don't, if you're lying, if you're making stuff up, then surely a face-to-face interview, you would be rumbled, you would be caught out in the lie. So, I mean, it's extraordinary that the Home Office is telling people that if they can give, quote, sufficient evidence to demonstrate they qualify for refugee status, they can make a decision using written evidence in a questionnaire. I mean, this is being applied to people coming from countries with already high acceptance rates, so Eritrea, Sudan, Yemen, places where for the most part, we've not been refusing people asylum because of the regimes and the wars and the conflicts going on in those countries. But this approach, which is supposed to drive down the backlog, will actually, for a lot of people, this will just be seen as cutting corners.
Well, of course it will. It may well drive down the backlog, but for all the wrong reasons in that respect. And, you know, one can only imagine how much of a hammering ChatGPT would be taking when it comes to filling out those application forms.
Well, you just have to wait and see, don't you? How many times has the same turn of phrase, the same little grammatical point been repeated on these applications? I mean, even insiders in the Home Office are saying this is inherently risky because if you can't sit someone down and probe them and actually sort of see into their mind as to why they want to claim asylum, then you're going to end up inevitably with cases where you've made the wrong decision, and that has a knock-on effect, very sadly, in communities where we've seen people who have been given asylum either just disregard the terms of that asylum, go back on holiday to their country of origin despite claiming it's risky, or go on to commit criminal offences.
Yeah, there was a fellow
UK.
went back to Afghanistan
on holiday,
to see his mates.
On holiday for
to see the lads.
An 8-week holiday back
nice
in Afghanistan. It's the key rule of asylum, which I think everyone across the board can agree on, is that if you say a country is too dangerous and you're given protected status in Britain on that basis, we take you at your word.
Yeah.
You cannot go back there on holiday. Surely that's something everyone can agree on.
But maybe some kind of, I don't know, sort of Stockholm syndrome set in with him, and he thought, I've got to get back to the war zone just to sort of taste the flavour of the country for 8 weeks and then return. Listen, Thomas, great to see you. Nice to have you with us as ever. Thomas Godfrey is reporter at The Sun, of course. Thank you to him. Back to you. Let's go to more of your calls. Lots to talk about, including, of course, the issue around free speech, immigration, which is where the whole free speech issue surrounding Jamie Michael, the former Marine, found himself. 47-year-old father of 2, hard-working dad, gave back to his community, volunteering as a football coach for his kids' football team. And all of that has just simply blown up in his face, even though he was found not guilty in a court of law over doing anything wrong. But the football club went, nah, not sure we can have him round here, really. Doesn't like those illegal migrants. That really is the upshot of what has been said here. Let's go to Abdul in Birmingham. Abdul, what have you got for us? Back to that issue of detention centres and foreign criminals. What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, to be honest, there are 2 things I would like to address to the government through yourselves. One is that the Home Office need to get their act together, and they need to speed up dealing with asylum seekers. If they are genuine, grant them. If they are not genuine, send them back.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And the second thing is the foreign criminals. I mean, according to your program, there's 14% foreign prisoners in our prison. Why don't they negotiate the country which they belong to, and they should be serving the sentence over there rather than here? Because, as you know, it's costing the taxpayers £3,500 per week to keep a prisoner in prison.
I mean, these numbers are insane, right?
Yeah, I understand. And the new proposal by the Home Secretary, the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, the proposal, obviously this is going to take a while if this law proposal is going to be approved. That she stated that, nobody's going to get it indefinitely within 5 years. They'll have to wait 15 to 20 years before they can get it indefinitely. Whether they're asylum seekers, whether they came as spouses, they'll have to just wait. Simple as that.
On that point, Abdul, thank you very much indeed for that, sir. More of your comment coming in. Paul in Durham says, the end of the jury trial thing is definitely to have control of the courtroom. How long before our kids are being encouraged to inform on us to the local commissioner? Cambodia, Ian, says Paul. Thank you for that. Tad in Cambridge. This is as plain as a pikestaff. Labour want to do away with trial by jury so they can silence any opposition to their insidious creeping Marxism. They're dangerous in the extreme. One in from Max. Afternoon, Ian. Jamie Michael served his country and was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, being his own life, in order to protect many things that the UK too often take for granted, one of which is freedom of speech. The irony is mind-boggling. You do want to sit down, don't you, with, like all of these decisions, I always make the point. There was one at the weekend that was driving me mad. What was that just kept rolling through my head? Every now and again there's a little niggle in the back of your head thinking, what was it that's bothering me? And you forget it for a moment. And then there's a reason my day is slightly curtailed. And you can't put your finger out. I'm having that moment now. But there was one at the weekend when you think, I want to find the individual that came up with this idea. Who set the ball rolling on this initiative that you're not allowed to say this or you can't say that? And we're all grown-ups here. We understand that there are clearly limitations on what you can publish. They're few and far between. You can't, you know, if you commit an act of violence through threats, whether it's on social, you know, if you wrote it on a poster, and I always make this point that I'm going to go and kill Alf at 4:30 in 43 Acacia Avenue, and I think you should all come with me, P.S. bring a scythe, then, and you stuck that on a billboard, of course the old bill would want a word in the same way as they would if you put it on social media. There are aggravated crimes that can be committed digitally. It's not all about hurty words, although many of the things, you know, even the stuff that is illegal and distasteful and rightly went to court, probably shouldn't end up in a custodial sentence, which is largely a form of punishment that is there reserved for those who are too dangerous to be punished in any other form. And the Connolly case will always be the greatest. You know, I'm not going to put Connolly up there as some kind of hero or bastion of free speech. By her own admission, she wrote something that was pretty darn awful and she shouldn't have done it. And it was swiftly removed. 31 months in jail. Boy, do I have a question mark over that. In fact, 31 hours in jail would be extraordinary for that. I mean, there's no place for that, none whatsoever. You can punish people, you can point out their wrongdoings, you can unequivocally state their guilt. Prison does not always have to be the answer for it, if at all. In the case of this former squaddie, Jamie Michael, there wasn't even an offence that was committed. That takes it to a whole new level. So yeah, actually our judicial system worked in favour of him. It worked properly. He went to court. I should never have got there in the first place, but clearly some people decided, including the CPS, that only a court can deal with this horrendous case of inciting racial hatred. And it was quite obvious because he used the word scumbags and psychopaths in this Facebook video. But the court prevailed and it provided a not guilty verdict. And they did so quickly. Arguably one of the quickest conclusions a jury has ever come to in recent times. 17 minutes to realise this bloke has no case to answer. He's not guilty. But then other bodies and establishments decided, well, you probably are. And as he said when he spoke to us earlier, you know, it's people in the street. Oh, yeah, it's that racist bloke. You know, the neighbour, the twitchy of the curtains, the school teachers. And in the most grim case, the local football club who said, no, you can't be a coach anymore because of your views. No, I haven't got those views. Did you not see the court case? Doesn't matter. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Let's do the voice of doom. Have we got a winner? This was the voice that we played you just before the news at 3.
Instead of searching for work.
These are some of the guesses. Clement Attlee, Neville Chamberlain, Enoch Powell, Tony Bennett. Is a bit Enoch Powell. Can we hear that again, Amy?
Instead of searching for work.
I can see why somebody would say Enoch Powell. It is not Enoch Powell. Tony Benn, no. Sir Keith Joseph, Peter Cook, Hugh Gateskill, no. Clement Attlee, no. Manny Shinwell, it is not. Harold Macmillan, no. Michael Foot, no. We haven't got a right answer. We have no right answer. By the way, David in New Cross says, what was the voice of doom that ran for 16 days? It was Ryland Clark was the answer to that last one. I did mention that on Friday. You'd never spotted, would you, from that clip we played? It was actually Lord Peter Brooke, who was a former Northern Ireland Secretary under the John Major government, Lord Peter Brooke. This one rolls over, though, to tomorrow for day 3. Stand by for that. This is Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. One in from Sue in Essex. Reference free speech. I'm sick and tired of all this one-sided system where only people who are deemed to be the right of the political divide are prosecuted. Whatever happened to rioters outside the school in Yorkshire where the teacher is still in hiding, and the case in Tower Hamlets when they will be prosecuted and banned from being anywhere near kids? Talk about two-tier. Everything in this country is now two-tier. Says Sue. Although somebody did point out earlier when I made a similar comment, and I did jot the number down because I thought it was rather interesting, that what are they called? What's the illegal Palestine group called? What are they called? Palestine Action. So far, 2,490 people have been arrested for supporting Palestine Action. And I did think that number was kind of interesting. And in terms of criminality, one of the longest prison sentences is from the bloke from Just Stop Oil, who I think is doing, is it 5 or 7 years or something? Gluing his buttocks to the M25 or some shenanigans like that. Back to your calls. Grace is down in London. What have you got for us, Grace? Good afternoon to you.
Hi.
Hello.
I think that it's really important that there is a reduction or elimination, ideally, in unpleasantness towards Muslim people.
Yeah.
But we need to make a distinction between Islam and Muslims. I mean, as your guest rightly said, definitions or prohibitions and legislation like the one that's being proposed probably won't actually help to reduce bullying, because some people will think that Muslims are getting special treatment and they'll be more resentful. Not that that's an excuse, but that's probably what will happen. But yeah, we need to recognise that people are not the same thing entirely as ideas and concepts.
Mm-hmm.
If someone mocks Christianity, I don't have any reason to feel personally offended. I'm an individual, and I'm upset that they resent Christianity, but I myself am not the same thing. I mean, you mentioned...
Do you feel... It's funny. Go on, you carry on, Grace, and then I'll respond.
Well, I mean, you mentioned earlier... I wouldn't really care that much if anyone did directly attack me personally, but I think... I mean, you mentioned earlier... abuse that's happened in the Catholic Church. I'm not Catholic, by the way. But we need to be able to criticise that and recognise that those people who did those despicable, evil things are not actually in any way connected or reflective of Jesus. And similarly, in the reverse, we should be able to criticise the founder of Islam and also not be seen to be condemning followers of him. We need to be able to have sensible discussions about philosophical ideas and what we consider to be reality.
But there is, but we should also look at commonality. And I have no trucking understanding that a lot of the sex abusers in the Catholic Church gravitated to the church because they felt it was a cover for them, and they felt that their religious position, and whether they were ever religious in the first place, I don't know. I'm sure many were or thought they were.
Jesus often pointed out that people within religious institutions sometimes aren't trying to follow God in their hearts. Sometimes, and Jesus was arguing with these people all the time, that they were there to try and get dominance over other people.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, there could well be It could be that, whatever it happens to be. But they did use their faith as a cover for what they're doing. And similarly with Islamic Pakistani grooming gangs, I think some would have... I mean, in the courtroom, I think there are a couple of examples where people who were convicted suggested, and don't quote me on this, I'm not saying this to be mischievous, but I'm sure there was at least a case where one guy said that he felt that it was God-given that he was able to do what he did. However, what we could all agree on is that culturally, those men were hiding under a kind of collective cloak of superiority. They felt their culture, their religion was superior to the, quote, white trash on the streets, and therefore attacking sexually those girls was no big deal. It didn't break any rules because they were beneath them. For want of a better way to look at it, an act of racism, if you like.
Yeah.
As well as the sexual abuse.
Yeah, it's hard to get one's head around it. I think, unfortunately, as human beings, we can often have a tendency to think we are somehow superior and more righteous than other people. And a crucial part of Christianity is to recognise, no, we're all sinners, we all need forgiveness. But yeah, most Muslims would not in any way condone that behaviour. So I'm quite sure that they would tell blokes who made such claims off. But again, we need to be able to look at people and beliefs separately to some extent. So even if we do think that Islam is wrong in one way or another way, still that would not be an acceptable reason for being unkind towards Muslim people. So we need to be able to criticise Islam and also be really respectful and compassionate towards Muslims.
Yeah. Listen, Grace, thank you for your call. Always interesting talking about that kind of religious aspect to it. And religion, of course, over the years has been used as a cloak for all manner of terrible things. You know, it wasn't that long ago, you know, relatively speaking, that the witch finder would go out with a, bloody crucifix in his hand. And if he thought he found a witch, by the way, he's being paid a lot of money for the witch, he could capture the witch and the witch could be killed, and that had the backing of the church. I'm sure there were people in the church who kind of scowled a bit and said, really? I mean, one of the signs, when you were a witch finder, there were certain signs, they were called familiars, and if you found, and it was only women they were looking for, a woman acting this out, like talking to herself. So if you spotted her, I don't know, hanging out the washing and she was talking to herself, you could argue she was a witch, and you were the witch finder. You were appointed the witch finder. You got, I don't know, the equivalent of 50 quid per witch. You could just drag her on a horse and take her to her fate. Another one, this is absolutely true, was if you caught a woman staring at a stoat. Stoat's like one of those little weasels. I don't fully know what a stoat... In an ID parade, I'd be lost between a weasel, a stoat, and a, polecat, whatever. But yeah, a stoat was seen as one of those, look, she's looking at a stoat. She's a witch. So religion has been, I mean, it's kind of like beyond parody now. I mean, people died because of this, but it fully endorsed by religion. And of course, religion in lots of areas endorses capital punishment in extreme cases. If you take the sort of ISIS merchants, those animals who believe that they are the purest form of Islam, and, chucking a gay bloke off the top of a building or setting fire to a woman in the town square is perfectly reasonable. One radical Muslim once said to me, Anjem Chowdhury, for reference, who's now serving a lot of time in jail, said, because I literally asked him about that. This was after an interview I did with him and Douglas Murray. And I said, what's the deal, though, with throwing somebody off a building? And his answer was, and I'm slightly paraphrasing, but I'm not misrepresenting. His answer was, you have to make the death dramatic and awful in order for it to be recognised for the sin that it is. So it's no good. I mean, as if it wouldn't be bad enough to be shot dead instantly. That would be... To make it more horrific kind of compounds the horror of the sin that the alleged perpetrator has committed. I mean, it's such nonsense. But again, it's all under the banner of religion. 0344 499 1000. More of your calls and comments on the way. Just gone 3:30. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. More comment from you. This comes in from Mark in Sheffield. When you speak to Jamie, this was... I've only just seen this one, Mark. It would have been handy if I'd seen it before. That's my fault, by the way. This was, of course, the story we were covering earlier. Jamie Michael, the 47-year-old father of two, who found himself in the horrific situation of being reported for inciting racial hatred, I think was the specific crime. Goes to court, found not guilty. But other things then happen. But Mark says, when you speak to Jamie on the show, please pass on our regards and thoughts at this time. I hope he stands as a local candidate and also takes the council to court for a waste of his time whilst he was on remand for absolutely no reason at all. Sending him strength and love from one veteran to another. Thanks, Ian. Pleasure to read that out. And I think he's probably still listening because he said he would. So happy to acknowledge that point. It's absolutely fascinating. And the idea that he was also on remand, didn't even get bail for this, for something he wrote that was found, he was found guilty in 17 minutes, found not guilty in 17 minutes. Just astonishing. And also this, we see adverts every year, loneliness affecting the elderly at Christmas, but new statistics show it is a pandemic sweeping the nation, apparently. A lot of lonely people out there, and it's not just the elderly. Up to 70% of under 35s now claim they suffer from loneliness, with the elderly at 43%. What is going on? Jill Fraser is the co-founder of Kissing It Better. Jill, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
I mean, we hear all sorts of analogies made about loneliness, don't we? Loneliness is as bad as for your health as smoking 10 cigarettes a day and these kind of things. I have no struggle in understanding that. It can be chronic, it can be choking, it can be horrendous. I mean, true loneliness rather than feeling a little bit, lonely for half an hour when your other half has gone shopping or something. That's love, actually. But loneliness is clearly something that we should take very seriously.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it is difficult to define it. As you just said, you can say you feel lonely for half an hour. That's not the same as somebody, particularly in the pandemic, when it really, became so apparent to everybody that people were stuck inside for weeks and weeks at a time, the elderly in particular, worrying that they might not even survive and get COVID and nobody would even know about it. The horror of that is not the same as as I say, the odd half hour here and there. But yes, we have noticed that lots of young people are also lonely because we're an intergenerational charity. So our aim is to connect young people with older people, to have conversations and to hopefully help each other. And that's exactly proved to be the case. We started off mainly trying to reduce the isolation of old age, but when we connected the young people together, we realised that it had a sort of affect both sides. And
this is something that can, obviously, mental health can then affect physical health, as I sort of alluded to at the beginning as well. So it's ongoing, of course. If you're not seeing anybody, like literally day to day, week to week, I don't think I've ever lived in that sort of scenario at all. Everyone likes the odd day when they're on their Todd and did my shopping, took my parcels back to the post office, laid on the bed, did that star thing because I was on my own and it was fantastic and it was lovely. You can enjoy that, but this is, clearly essentially an illness.
What we're trying to raise awareness of is that in every village, every town, there are countless people who are lonely, and you know about them. To be honest, the likes of I would know that there were people living on their own in my village, or people, long periods of time they can't get out. And what we say to our young people is, you might be aware that the lady down the road doesn't get out much, or it might be a close relative. You need to do something about it. And if you do something about it, and to think about it, do it. Pick up that phone and make a phone call. Or if you're making a cake, make two and take one round to that person. Or maybe drop as I said the other day, it's coming up to Christmas, drop a TV guide through the door and maybe start a discussion about what do you think you'll be watching over Christmas. Create that connection, because you'll be so thrilled yourself that you've made a difference. When somebody says, thank you so much for thinking of me, it's really made a difference. And the legacy of that visit doesn't just last for however long you're on the doorstep or whatever. Once you've left, that person feels less isolated for a little while afterwards, because they're aware that somebody in the community has taken the trouble to care about them a little bit.
And
so I think it's really important.
Absolutely. The whole issue of younger people being lonely, though. That's the headline that I think has grabbed many, because, you know, when older people are lonely, which is obviously also awful, but you can at least see how it happened. You can see that, you know, somebody became widowed, they're on their own, they don't have a great social life, they might have mobility issues. But when you're 30 years old and you're lonely, you do scratch your head and think, what the heck's gone on here?
Well, I think we have to look at the meaning of loneliness. So is it linked to feeling of hopelessness at times? Is that young people sitting on their own, looking at social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, and it appears that all their friends are doing really exciting things, when the reality is that most of them are as lonely, if not more lonely than they are. And often when they start to get a job, they're working from home, so they're not getting that connection with people around them and sensing a greater understanding of what the world's really like. That's when it gets to be quite serious, is that, so we encourage young people to come on to our Zooms. We run Zooms every day. We started it in the pandemic when we had no choice, but they are as lively almost today as they were 5 years ago when the pandemic started, because there's that sense of connection. And a lot of young people come on, and I remember in the early days when my colleagues said, oh, we're doing really well. Some people come on to every single session. And I said, well, I'd like to think we're doing well, but actually it's because so many young people are lonely, and they come onto a space where there might be 20 or 30 other people having a chat with older people, and they feel part of a gang, and they feel safe, and they feel, because we know them all, that we would always engage with all of them at some point during that session, that they too get a sense of value and purpose. And when they come off that Zoom, because I always say at the end, thank you so much for coming on, it was great, blah, 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 there's a sense of feeling valued. And I think when we all live and work in isolation, whether it's social media during the evenings or working on our own when we are out and about during the day, when we're not going out to work, we're staying at home, we lose that sense of being valued beyond the actual job we're trying to do.
Yeah. And of course, on a deeper level as well, you can be lonely in a crowd, can't you? I mean, it's not always just about specific interaction.
I think that's the big thing, is that loneliness is an emotion, and if you look it up, it'll say it's a feeling of feeling. Yeah. It's feeling sad. It's a painful emotional experience to be lonely. You can choose to be isolated. As you say, you can do your star stretch, or you can choose to have a day at home, and you're effectively isolated, but you've made that choice. And we do teach young people how many people can be lonely in a crowded room. And as we come up to Christmas, we say to all of them, you know, you'll get granny, great grandfather, whoever it might be, come round, and they'll be sitting in a corner, and somebody will say, are they all right? Even without asking. Oh no, they've said they're fine. But the reality is they can't hear above the babble of the noise. It's hard to engage in conversation, but they are intensely lonely at that point, because everybody else seems to be having a good time and nobody is really engaging with them. If you're in a care home, as many were in the pandemic, you won't be on your own. You'll be in a room full of people, but you feel incredibly lonely, because the separation that you feel from those that you most care about is incredibly intense. Yeah. So we teach about the loneliness of a crowded room, which in some cases can be worse than being on your own, because you can see the people who are not engaging with you, and it makes you feel more intense about your situation.
And of course, you know, Christmas, if anything compounded that feeling, I guess it's Christmas time. There is something about it, putting the tree up. If you do put a tree up, of course, you may decide not to if you're on your own. Maybe that makes it, I don't know, a sort of almost a more isolating situation. But, you know, we put our tree up yesterday, and we were oddly talking about in our neck of the woods of, you know, trying to find out, there's a couple of those kind of WhatsApp groups for locals and the neighbourhood thing, asking people to ask if there's a neighbour around that is going to be on their own at Christmas, and would they like a Christmas dinner, and, you know, to try and encourage people to maybe do something in that respect, us included. And I'd never really thought about it before, but it's only when you look at the lights on the tree, and my kids are playing around, being nutters as they tend to be, and the Christmas music is playing, and you've got a glass of wine in your hand while it's all happening. Imagine having none of that, not even not by choice, not even the possibility of doing anything like that.
Well, thanks to the Times Christmas Appeal, which is why this has led to all this, and we've been writing articles in the paper, we've been able to really highlight the fact that as we're coming up to Christmas, it's an tense time when people can feel lonely, and yet there's so much opportunity to engage. Because if you are putting up your Christmas tree, ask your older relatives, so what did you do during the war? What did you do, you know, back even before the war, when it was Christmas? How did you celebrate it? Their memories, if they've got early dementia, will be stronger in the long term than they are in the more recent past. Yeah. And they can basically start not just telling you stories, but educating young people to say, because we didn't have this in those days. This wasn't an opportunity for us. They hadn't invented such and such. We made our own Christmas decorations out of painting newspapers or, you know, torn up newspaper, and actually start to to give them that opportunity, even to try that today rather than constantly going onto their iPad or iPhone. Why don't we make some Christmas decorations the way we used to do it all those years ago? What are the carols that they most remember, and why are they so important to them? I've got some wonderful stories we've collected about the significance of certain carols and what they meant to people while they were separated from their loved ones during the war. It's a really good time for reminiscence and a really good time to connect. But don't just forget, the worst time of all is January, when it's all over and people think, well, maybe they did do a bit over Christmas. Let's look ahead, because loneliness happens every day of the year and not just at Christmas.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Listen, Jill, it's been great to speak. You also get the accolade of being the first guest of the year to wear a Christmas jumper.
Oh, thank you, yes.
Yeah.
I went into that a couple. Again, we do say, if you're going to visit somebody who's very lonely, actually wear something that sparks a conversation, because actually we tend to wear black and brown at this time of year and it's all a bit grim. But if you've got some Christmas earrings or a Christmas necklace or something, it's another. This is actually quite retro, this jumper. This goes back probably as a design from the 1940s, I think.
I like it.
Another trigger of conversation. Or take something with you that would say, do you remember this? Because I came across this in our attic. Does this mean anything to you? Again, you're making that older person not just feel, they're not feeling patronised, they're feeling useful, because they'll go, oh God, we used to have one of those, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I love that. Listen, great stuff. Jill, thank you for being with us. Jill Fraser, co-founder of Kissing It Better, on that issue of loneliness and also the Christmas jumper. Never done a Christmas jumper. Hate the idea of Christmas jumper. I was thinking of splashing out on a 6/7 festive version, because the kids will love that, because that's the last thing they want to see, isn't it? Their dad doing that gag. They're all over the place. The kids, enjoy it. Finn, our producer, he's got Christmas jumper tripe written all over him. He loves all that caper. Bought one last Friday, knitting one at the moment as we speak. Let's go to Freya in Meriden in the West Midlands. Freya, how are you doing?
Well, I love your programme.
Thank you.
And I absolutely love you, because you're so sensible. I never, ever get tired of your comments. But I'm seriously concerned about this opening up, because I've recently been subjected to a horrible incident where somebody was trying to rip me off for almost £17,000 for a roof replacement.
Oh, God.
Okay?
So
that's no lie.
No, I don't imagine for 1 second it is. It's not. Yeah, and is this because you're on your own?
Be lonely, and you invite people in to help you. Yeah. And I seriously need to advise that lovely lady who thinks you can go out and kiss everybody. I need to advise, be very, very careful.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you came into contact with somebody that you thought was there as a like company that became a rip-off merchant?
Oh, yes. Definitely.
Is it solved? You didn't part with the money?
Pardon?
You didn't part with the money, no?
It becomes rather more involved than that, even, Ian, if I'm honest.
Okay.
The company, the roofing company, were involved with a weird kind of, if I can say so, invoice to go, invoicing company, and they were chasing me for money, and they had to have different email addresses. Wow. All sorts of things went wrong. And when I was in my desperate position, looking for friends, I seemed to have sort of inadvertently shared my horrible experience with other people, which I would never have done, ever. Honestly, we need to be very careful. That lady was lovely, talking about people being lonely and, doing this and going around and talking to neighbours and blah, blah. Well, yes, I agree, but my God, this isn't the kind of world I grew up in. This is a dangerous world where...
Yeah, and it's such a shame. It's a real shame for people who do have good intentions, because, everybody can, I understand it. There's a, very elderly lady who lives quite near me, and I haven't seen her around for a little while, but I'm aware through other neighbours that she is still around. She's not as mobile as she was. She was, incredibly swift for somebody of her years. But the idea of just randomly knocking on her door and thinking that she should answer because she might want company would be as terrifying as as anything, really. So I get exactly what you're saying, and thank you, Freya. Lovely to speak to you, and I wish you luck with everything as well. And I'm glad you got through the ordeal, and I hope as unscathed as possible. 0344 499 1000. Finn has just sent me an image, by the way, of his Christmas jumper. Now, if I saw somebody in that Christmas jumper, I'd put them on a list. I'm just saying, all right? Just saying. Is that a llama? With a 3D scarf? Yeah, got that. I thought it was a Sheffield United scarf for a second. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. This is Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Stuart says, so according to this terrible government, Big Ange is needed again, despite being kicked out for not paying her taxes. She's also famous for calling Tories scum, but they are their lefty friends. Don't like ordinary patriotic Brits calling illegal migrants scum, people they don't know anything about other than they're choosing to leave France in order to rip the British people off. I mean, even if that isn't their intention, and I think the average person probably thinks I can get a better life here than I would down Eritrea way or in Sudan or Syria or any of those other countries. I get that. I don't have any trouble understanding that. But what I do have trouble understanding is exactly the point that Stuart made there. Remember Angela Rayner, scum, and they're all shouting out, yeah, go on, Ange. This former Iraq veteran, found him, he used the word, describing some migrants as scumbags and psychopaths. And he's quite clearly, and he said this when we spoke to him earlier, referring to the people who've done either scumbaggy things or psychopathic things, like a sex offence or some other form of criminality. It's not that we haven't seen it. No one's saying it's everyone, but we're playing roulette with British people's lives here. Who knows? 60,000 people on boats since Starmer became Prime Minister. Slightly more, actually. I mean, can anyone say, yep, I can say hand on heart, every single one of those people, we know exactly who they are. They're all absolutely fine, upstanding young lads. Even if 99% were. Who's the 1%? Who is that one? You don't know. The government don't know. The police don't. Nobody knows. So the idea that this guy would use that word, psychopath or scumbag, to describe people who have a proclivity to crime or other forms of offences should not come as a shock to anyone, which is why the court found him not guilty. Adam is in Nottingham. On that dictionary definition of Islamophobia, Adam, which they're deeply searching for, what are you thinking?
Well, Islamophobia is by that with any other religion. If you can take the mick out of one religion, you should be able to take the mick out of that one. But you was asking, what would these people actually use their religion, to get out of things? Of course they would. Narcissism, breaks barriers of religion, politics, and everything else. But and I'm only going to go on my own experiences here again, as I always do, simply because if they can use the law to try and get one over you, and I'm just using I have a couple of experiences. I'll just use one. I was holding my baby in the arms. This guy was coming up to try and get some kids out of his yard, very violent, raised his fist, punched me while I had a baby in my arms.
Wow.
I told him, I'm calling the police, I'm having you arrested. He says, if you call the police, I'll tell them you're a racist.
Wow.
Now, if they can do
that easily,
stop them on anything else. And this isn't the first time. I had a guy come out of the car, started blaming me for him crashing into the back of another car. Bearing in mind, I'm walking on the pavement, and he accused me because I was talking to...
How was it your fault?
I know, this is the point. I was next to another Asian-looking guy who someone I knew from a shop, and he come up to me, and I don't know, to get him on his side or something, he accused me of giving him a racist stare. That's why he crashed into the back of this car. I turned to the other guy and goes, can you show me what a racist stare is? He just shook his head like, I don't know what you mean.
That is bananas.
I know,
mate.
and it's not, it doesn't end there. But all the racism I've actually experienced it on my side, but just not by being directly racist, but using the race card. And I think that's horrible.
I think using the race card. I think using the race card should be treated with equal severity to those who are actually racist or horrible.
You can destroy someone.
Of course you can. You only need to get the word out there that you've been accused of racism, and there's going to be at least one person on your street, at least one parent in your school that is going to believe it.
And just going on about this ex-vet, I just want to know if any of the parents are disappointed with that, I would take my kid out of that football club and remove all sponsorship and everything. And I think they should do that in protest and just not have that football club.
Yeah. I get it.
It's the easiest way to do it, to show, well, if you're going to do that, we're just going to remove the people, and you can't run a club without the people.
Well, that would make sense. Adam, thank you very much indeed for that. Adam in Nottingham, great call. This from Stuart, who says, I'm sure the good, honest, hard-working human rights lawyers of Great Britain will do their best to make sure the unscrupulous, lying immigrants are not accepted and immediately booted out. We're talking about those illegal immigrants that I think Stuart's probably referring to the deportation centre at Heathrow, where you arrive at because it's already been decreed you are going to be deported. But in the meantime, you might want to do a little bit of pottery, and here's an abacus to do some maths with. It's £1 billion, by the way, you're going to pay, just to let you know. Peter Cardwell is here after the news on Drive. Peter.
Hello there. Outrageously expensive immigration centre there.
Lot of wonga.
Well, absolutely.
Twice the price it was when it came up for the last tender.
Of course. You know,
how did it go up 42%? How?
These things just spiral out of control. Anything to do with government procurement, it is outrageous. Also, free speech, as you were saying, we're going to be talking about as well. Right-wingers branded a danger to children. We'll speak to Isabel Oakshott about that. She's a big documentary out in a couple of days' time. We'll talk to her about that as well. Also, Essex Police interviewed Nigel Farage, his accuser of election fraud. We'll talk a little bit about that. The migration issue, lots to talk about in regard to migrants granted asylum without face-to-face interviews. Inheritance tax, an absolute scandal as well. It's going to hurt family farms. That's a report by Labour itself. Also, the nighttime industries, I'm fascinated by this because they've been absolutely battered by the COVID lockdowns. And now Labour wants jobless youths to work in pubs and restaurants to